Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 162 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. I'm joined, as always, by the co-host of the show, the very hip Matt Feuerstein. Matt, you're always down with the new lingo, down with the trends. We all know this. Anyone that listens regularly knows this, right? And I've been informed that you may be keeping up even with this episode. You will maybe pull something out.
Well, Trevor, I have to say that the way I feel right now, it's giving hello to the listeners.
Well,
only Trevor finds it funny, but I'm glad that he does.
That's all that matters. But
it's giving hello, it's giving Honor Nation, it's giving welcome back to the show.
Well, folks, Honor Nation, deep vein thrombosis. I have something, and actually, we have to shift into something serious because this was something I was going to talk about in the last episode, but our Man Up episode was so jam-packed with stuff, I knew I had to make some cuts to keep things in a relatively good, length. So I saved it for here. Matt, we have something deadly serious to talk about, and that is about a month ago, it came to our attention. A little birdie told us that Todd Martin, formerly of F4W, and then he moved on to the Torch, where I believe he still does a regular weekly podcast with Wade Keller called The Fix. That he had he had branched out to a new wrestling podcast, and that podcast, Matt, it was called Through the Years. I'll just say this, Todd, we've been working this corner for damn near a decade at this point. We have built this brand. People used to think when they heard Through the Years, they would go, oh, you're talking about the Kenny Rogers song. They don't anymore. They think about us. And we worked hard to do that. You don't get on our block. And I'll just say this too, Todd, watch yourself because for people that have also been keeping track with Todd Martin this week, he was a brief guest on the 83 Weeks podcast with Eric Bischoff. And there's a clip floating around where that did not go good because Eric Bischoff, and this will surprise people, was a gigantic asshole to somebody. And I will say that's not coincidence. That is out of Eric's character. And I'll just reveal this right now. Todd, I called Eric up and I said, easy. That's what I call him. I call him easy. I said, you're always saying controversy creates cash. Well, how about if I give you some cash and you create a little controversy? I paid him off, Todd. So watch it.
Trevor didn't run any of this by me, for the record. So first of all, it's giving Through the Years. But also, I, as Trevor, you will admit, the person that came up with this name for the show, I fully endorse Todd Martin using the name. I think that, he'll take it to places it's never been before. It's giving Through the Years, through more years, and it's giving gratitude to Todd Martin.
Yeah, and in all seriousness, I have not listened to Todd Martin's show, this new podcast. I've listened to other Todd Martin podcasts, but from the sounds of it, it is going back to something he had done many years ago with Brian Alvarez, where he had a regular segment with him, which was very enjoyable, where he went through some like the earliest wrestling observers. And so it seems like it's him going back to revisit that 80s wrestling kind of stuff that he did really well back then. So I would implore everyone to give it a try, because obviously I'm not being serious with the other stuff, except, okay, I am being serious that Eric Bischoff is a monumental asshole. And anyone who watched that clip, like, I will just say, there are people in the wrestling media that still take that guy seriously and still treat him like a serious person. And even if he wasn't shown to be a flagrant liar, so people that don't know, that don't see the clip, Todd gets brought on to be on 83 years. 83 weeks. The streak was not that long. And as he's getting introduced, he, plugging his new podcast, which is apparently called Through the Years, he mentions I cover stuff, and I just covered, a recent, instance of this interpromotional feud in New Japan in the 80s, which was not even the inspiration, he said, for the NWO. He said a precursor to the NWO. And Bischoff just immediately pouts and basically kicks him off the show and is just a complete and just a titanic asshole to Todd. And on top of that, I saw today someone post a quote online of Eric from an interview he did on Talk is Jericho years ago, where he admitted he took the fucking NWO from New Japan. So again, if you take that guy seriously in the year of our Lord 2026, if you think that's like a good guy or a trustworthy guy, like you have lost a lot of respect with me, and I granted the respect of Trevor Dame is worth very little in today's economy, but I will just say that. And can you tell I've been in a bad mood this week about various things in my life, Matt?
Todd said no hard feelings to Eric, but Trevor Dame never said no hard feelings.
No, I have hard feelings. I will also say, I think when I was looking up Todd's show, Matt, there may be a third wrestling podcast named Through the Years. I'm just saying,
that doesn't even include all of probably the non-wrestling podcasts that have that name.
Matt, I can't take it. I just
This is why we have the unique spelling. It's to differentiate ourselves from all the other Through the Years.
Although apparently there is a Pokemon character spelled THROH, and I will just say, I think he did come first before us. So
but does somebody have a retrospective podcast about him called Through the Years?
I don't know.
And I bet you it's not pronounced through either. But I guess I don't know.
Yeah, you got to catch them all. That's all I know, Matt. But
we caught them all. We caught all of the ROH shows up to this point. We've caught all of them. So I think that we're doing the best that we can.
So we have a little bit of news to cover between the last Ring of Honor shows and this one. This is the start of a brand new double shot, so there's been some time between shows. And we have a few things. First thing, Matt, this was an oversight on my part. I did not mean to cut this. I will say I do not want you to do this, Matt, but I want all our listeners, take what I'm about to say, cut it from this show, manually stitch it into your downloads of the last episode, because I forgot to give, this is incredibly important, I forgot to give the Wrestling Observer newsletter Man Up reader poll results. So I will just say, for the pay-per-view, 114 people gave it a thumbs up. That would be 91.9% of the vote. 0 people gave it a thumbs down. There's often on these Observer polls, no matter how good a show is, the 1 or 2 people that either like to troll or just think differently. And then, Matt, this is what tickled me. 10 people gave that show, 8.1%, a thumbs in the middle, which for me is almost funnier than a thumbs down.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weirder than a thumbs down, because it's like a thumbs down would make sense if like this is just not for you, you know?
Or you're turned off by like the Steam Generico stuff so much that you're just like, you know what, they left a sour taste in my mouth. But to be like, that was like an average wrestling show.
Yeah. Bizarre.
And the Briscoes versus Steam Generico actually won Best Match, 61 votes. Morishima and Bryan got 47. So it was a fairly close race there among
it's closer than I would expect. But I guess, that match was probably just so upsetting to a lot of people. The ladder match was, especially at that time. So I'm guessing that's the reason.
Next piece of news, something lighter. We can all use something lighter after me being fake mad. The Observer wrote this at the time. This was something that was bubbling up, and this is a bit of a blast from the past. Dave writes, regarding the American Gladiators NBC mid-season replacement series that Hulk Hogan will host, both Matt Cross from ROH and Daniel Puder are among those who tried out for spots as gladiators and are in the hunt. Cross may have a disadvantage because the old Gladiator show wanted tall, jacked up guys, and Cross is short. Puder is tall, but isn't as jacked up as the old Gladiators were. And I looked it up. I believe Cross never made Gladiators. Matt, did you watch the original American Gladiators when you were a kid?
Yes, very much I did. It was always on right after WWF on like weekend afternoons. So it was perfect syndication lineup for someone like me. Absolutely. I was into it. And I watched both American Gladiators documentaries that appeared on, I think, like Netflix and Hulu or whatever it was a couple of years ago. Yes, it was definitely, those were big nostalgia pulls for me.
I've always thought about watching those, but I never got around to it. Are those any good?
I don't know if I'd call them good, but if you have any nostalgia for American Gladiators, I think you'd enjoy it. I forget which one was better. One was clearly better than the other, but I forget which.
My other strange hobby, other than watching pro wrestling and doing a podcast about it, is watching British television trivia shows. And for some reason through those, I discovered that in Britain, they also have gladiators, but they just call it gladiators. And I don't know if that means they invented it, but for some reason that gobsmacked me when I was like, from Gladiators? Is that like an old Roman show? I was like, no, I had to look it up and go, no, they have their own gladiators, but they're not British gladiators. They are simply gladiators, Matt. That brings us to the Observer. This is something that I think we talked about briefly at the time in the Ring of Honor timeline when it came up, but this linked to a Bryan Danielson interview that he gave during this point, 2007, which we'll have a couple fun quotes from that. But Dave wrote here, in a trivia note, Bryan Danielson wrestled John Cena when neither were stars on a 2003 episode of Velocity. Danielson was just an enhancement guy, and Cena's career was sputtering after the early push and was actually almost forgotten and in danger of being dropped. Quote, we didn't even know we were going to have the match, said Bryan Danielson to Alex Marvez last week. It kept getting canceled. About 10 or 15 minutes before that show was supposed to go on the air, someone said, hey, can you guys wrestle? I don't remember the match, but I do remember the payday was cool. What's really cool is that John Cena is the nicest guy. I'm glad he's having the success he's having. Regarding going to the WWE, Bryan said, quote, a lot of WWE guys on TV who aren't on all the pay-per-views and working the undercards, I make more money than them. Plus, I'm not really in wrestling to make tons of money. I do it because it's fun with the added benefit of getting good money. It's not like I'll never consider going to WWE, but I really enjoy what I'm doing. There's no reason for me to change. So we get the other quotes to him, but this is a fun blast from the past. One that he's praising John, knowing that they will eventually, for a brief time, become kind of brother-in-laws, and also.
Yeah, and reality TV co-stars.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that they have this early connection.
And I think a lot of us have probably seen that Velocity match a few times. It's been online for a very long time, and I remember thinking that it was a good Velocity match for the amount of time it got.
And it is interesting that a couple years after this, when Bryan does get in the mode of, I need to make this more of a career, where he does get more open to going to WWE and leaving the world of the indies, where at this point, most of his interviews were like this. And we've talked about before too, where, the famous phone call when Bryan got temporarily released from WWE for the choking, incident with the tie angle during the original Nexus thing, and where Vince McMahon kind of apologetically calls him up, and he's kind of shocked when Bryan says to him, I'll be making more money than you were paying me back on the indies. Like, you don't have to worry about me. And Vince apparently did not know the pay scale for independent wrestling at that point. So yeah, it is interesting that Bryan, even in 2007 was like, yeah, I know what some of those guys are making if they're not like in really good positions, which it can't be true now with indies. I feel like the indies have changed enough, and WWE's pay scale, while still very unfair, has gone up enough where I think everyone in WWE makes like minimum low six figures, where
including people that are like in Evolve or
no, I think NXT and Evolve, and like the WWE ID program, that's different. But I think people like Bryan, the way that quote made it out was like people on the main roster, because this was before a real big time like NXT expansion, all that stuff. He's, that quote makes it sound like I know people on the low card of Raw and SmackDown that I'm making more money than, which I don't know if that would be the truth for indie wrestlers today.
Yeah,
and then we get
sorry.
Oh,
yeah, I was going to say just. He was talking about people who aren't always on pay-per-views, and like nowadays, a very high percent of the roster is almost never on a pay-per-view, except maybe the Royal Rumble, and I feel like not even that sometimes, just because they have a pretty large roster and such, lightly booked pay-per-views.
Yeah, it's a big difference. But then we come to a quote that I couldn't hold just for the show. I wanted to put on Twitter, and a lot of people seem to be delighted by it. We will go to we'll get to it in a sec. Alex Marvez asks a couple more questions. One is, what are the career goals you're set for yourself at this point, that you've set for yourself at this point? And Bryan says, I don't have any career goals other than enjoying myself and not getting hurt. Laughs. It says here, I like how he's laughing at the idea of not getting hurt.
Well, at this particular time, especially.
Yeah. I don't know how long I'll be wrestling. When it stops being fun, I'll stop wrestling. I don't have any career goals like wanting to be in WWE or anything like that. I want Ring of Honor to do the best we can do and see where we go from there. If I'm still happy in 2 years, I'll still be doing this. If not, I'll do something else. And then Alex asks, like what? And Bryan responds, if you haven't heard this on Twitter, seen this on Twitter, pause now and think for a few minutes about what he might say. I would almost bet anything you won't guess what he says. Brian answers, that's a big topic of concern. If I could do anything, I'd like to pick strawberries, but with no pressure. I'd pick a lot of strawberries. I'd pick some and eat some and marry some really rich, hot lady who could pay all my medical bills in the future. That was his answer.
Well, so it is very charming, I have to admit. But there is also something a little bit like problematically naive about it, in the sense of like people who actually pick fruit are often doing it under very difficult and unfair conditions. But the other thing that I found amusing was, did he marry a hot rich lady? I think kind of, right?
Yeah, because
she probably could have paid all his medical bills. So I'm wondering, like, okay, so I think it's a harder question when they got married, but when Bree and Brian first got together, do you think that she was richer than him? I mean, she was in some ways treated better on TV than him, but he was still like, they probably still paid the male performers more, even someone at Brian's level who wasn't pushed, right? So he probably still was making more than her in like 2011.
I will also say the thing that I wonder is, I wonder how she obviously had to have gotten paid more than he did for Total Bellas, but I wonder how much she got paid for that show, which I believe ran multiple seasons.
Yeah,
you know,
I definitely know people.
I definitely
know people in my life who like know that show and like know the people on that show, but never watched wrestling, for sure.
Yeah. Those reality shows for a time, like those WWE ones, and I think Total Bellas was kind of the top tier, most successful one. You know, yeah, they did attract people that were just into reality television and the rhythms of that without being really into professional wrestling. So
yeah, that said, with the amount of money that Brian probably made, like in his later years in WWE and in his AEW run, he's probably as rich as anyone in that family.
And also, Brian talking about that reminds me of my dad gave me advice when I was too young to hear any. I would argue there's no good time to hear this, but I was too young when he told me this. He told me Trevor, when you grow up, marry a woman that is rich, but that's also old, so that has one foot in the grave and the other foot in the bank. Which, in hindsight, doesn't even like. Do rich people don't spend a lot of time inside the bank? Like
no, but their feet do. They drop off their feet. But seriously, Trevor, you know, as far as that advice goes, it is definitely not too late.
So I'm getting Matt. It's the reverse of the old Dazed and Confused line, where, you know, the great thing about high school girls is I keep getting older and they keep getting the same age. The bad thing about senior citizens is they stay the same age and I keep getting older, Matt.
You're still a lot younger than them.
Yeah.
Trevor, are you going to marry an 85-year-old rich lady? Are you going to do it this year? Is it going to happen?
Matt, I do like canasta. I could be tempted.
There you go.
Finally, we have one last news story, which, you know, is basically will become you know, a bit of a relevant thing for the show we're about to cover, which is between the last show and this show in Ring of Honor history. This happened. The PW Torch writes, Mark Briscoe suffered a dislocated foot in a motorcycle accident. He has been pulled from the upcoming FIP events, but he has not yet been pulled from his next scheduled ROH dates. Matt, I've heard a lot about dislocated shoulders. Not often have I ever heard about a dislocated foot, which for some reason makes me squirm. Like the idea of your foot just floating loose in your skin, like dislocated foot. That is just a weird sounding injury.
Like the whole foot. Yeah, it's a problem.
And again, it just adds it feels like over the course of this podcast, just covering the ROH timeline, Mark has had like 3 or 4 insane injuries, and the fact that he's still going all these years later, it's crazy, you know, that you talk about wrestlers that have had bad, you know, Brian Pillman famously had to have his ankle fused into a walking position from a car accident. And here's Jay, who's like, yeah, my foot's dislocated and I'll be back in a few weeks. Like, just the guy lives just an insane 9 lives, athletic life. But that brings us to the show we are covering today. That is Honor Nation, which took place October 5th, 2007 at the Reggie Lewis Track and Athletic Center in Boston, Massachusetts for a reported crowd of 400 fans. If that seems low, there is a reason for that. PW Torch wrote at the time, the October 5th show in Boston, Massachusetts has to be considered a success as ROH was able to draw around 500 fans. And to be clear, Torch and Observer often disagree on attendance. We always go with the Observer for consistency. And Torch continues, despite going up against a Red Sox playoff game against the California Angels. So yeah, this was a show they had the misfortune of running in Boston head to head with a Boston Red Sox playoff game in Boston.
And the Red Sox did win the World Series that year, right?
I wouldn't be the best person to ask baseball questions, but I believe that's also why they called the show Honor Nation, right? Because I think they called like
I figured that out myself later because I am not much of a sports fan myself. But yes, this was the fan base was called Red Sox Nation, and and I know that obviously Gabe Sapolsky is from Boston or Massachusetts at least, so he has some closeness with that culture there. So yes, Red Sox Nation, Honor Nation. It's an extremely clever name, Trevor.
I will say the 400 that were there, they were very loud on the show.
Yeah, great crowd.
It is one of those examples, I think we sometimes see it in modern AEW, where sometimes that smaller crowd, it's not disproportionately quieter because the people that come out are all the true bluest, most dedicated, knowledgeable, passionate fans you have. And maybe those extra fans are the ones that are more casual, less engaged with the product that might have not made that much noise anyway. So
definitely,
yeah, you wouldn't. It was interesting to be like, wow, this is still a very lively crowd, despite the fact that it's a somewhat low attendance by ROH standards at the time. And Brian Alvarez, not on the ball here. I don't know where he got this from. Brian Alvarez in Figure 4 Weekly wrote about this show. ROH on Friday night in Boston ran before a packed house. It was not packed.
Yeah.
You could very clearly tell it was not packed. The bleachers were not full. But anyway, one last thing that I decided to put here, because he's referring to the shows we're about to cover. This is from the Wrestling Observer, and this is something that Dave reported right after this double shot weekend. Dave wrote, Gabe Sapolsky said that at the shows this weekend, he's noticed an effect of everything learned from Chris Benoit. He said several of the guys are concerned and talking about concussions and their effects. He said there's a definite attempt to tone down damage to the head, although in some cases, whether it be for guys in their big match of the year, or if the adrenaline of the guys gets going, sometimes it drives them to do things. He says guys may continue to pull out all the stops in their big match of the year, but not on every show. He also said there's more concern over steroid use in the locker room than he's ever seen in the past. Before, the mentality was it was something certain guys did, but now they are debating it. The feeling is still that unless you are on the juice, you will never get to WWE, but they also at least look at it as a health concern. Use in the company isn't as much a pressure thing, because here you are judged on performance and not physique. Obviously, and then Dave adds at the very end, obviously, since Kevin Steen and El Generico have been pushed as main eventers. Which I get what Dave's saying, but that almost sounds like kind of like just a little knife, and they're like, yeah, clearly. But it is interesting that Gabe was talking about in reference to these shows when we're about to cover a show where Necro Butcher takes multiple chair shots to the head. But yeah, it's interesting how it was changing things. And the one guy I noticed in terms of steroid use was when it looked like Aries was going to transition months earlier to TNA full time. He definitely seemed to be getting bigger, and I've noticed on the recent shows we've been watching, once he's just back in ROH, you can see he gets back down to a less bloated looking size, I will say. So I don't generally do the steroid guessing games, but I could see that as a guy going, well, if I'm not going to one of the two big companies, it's not going to be a career impediment if I just look like an athletic person and not some jacked up giant dude for my height. So, I mean, even CM Punk, remember when he was going to WWE, all of a sudden he put on I'm not saying he did steroids, but it looked like he put on 10 pounds of muscle.
Well, I mean, yeah, look at him now. I mean, yeah, again, I'm not making any comments about steroids at all, but yes, I mean, even him, the way he looks now compared to the way he looked in AEW, right? Yeah. And AEW obviously is a TV company, and bodies are important there too. But he's definitely bigger now for sure than he was 3 years ago.
That used to be a tell when guys were going to go to the WWE is you would watch on the indies. If all of a sudden someone like had a dramatic quick weight loss or muscle gain, you'd be like, oh shit, are they talking with WWE? Because it was just like they must be feeling this pressure to get, to that cosmetic standard. And yeah, it was a weird time. But we opened the show with a backstage promo with Delirious cutting his promo in Delirious Ease. We can make out a few things. He says he's going to play a game of Hangman, and he spells out the word die. So obviously he's angry at the Hangman 3.
But isn't that line less potent when he's like, like shock, I'm spelled out the word die, when the game Hangman is already predicated on the idea of hanging somebody to death? Right? Like, oh, this game about death, I'm going to spell the word die. Ha ha ha. Like, it kind of defangs it a little bit,
He just spells out the word literal. But
yes.
We had 2 dark matches on this show. Brian Fury defeated Sugarfoot Alex Payne, and Handsome Johnny, the future Ivar of the War Raiders in WWE, defeated Rhett Tice. This was, I believe, not his first pre-show match, so he was getting a couple at this time.
Still very handsome to this day.
Yeah, definitely. And big burly men. Gotta love him, Matt. And that brings us to the opener. That would be the Hangman 3. Adam Pearce and Brent Albright defeated the Resilience of Eric Stevens and Matt Cross in 12 minutes, 2 seconds when Albright pinned Stevens after a Hell Nelson suplex. So we're getting still early on in the Hangman 3 run. Another tag match from them. I think this is the first time we've seen this combination of a duo in the ring in ROH. What did you think?
Well, first of all, who bought Hangman 3 t-shirts?
I was going to say that too. That's the other thing. They come out for the first time wearing Hangman 3 shirts. And Matt, I literally wrote in my notes, ask Matt who bought Hangman 3 t-shirts.
Well, I think I do have an answer. Some people are just completists, Like they're going to buy like every shirt. Like, I mean, I don't know why those t-shirts are extremely overpriced in general, but somebody bought them. But I don't think there was anybody who was like a huge Hangman 3 fan. I could be wrong. Shane Hagedorn, do you have any groupies to this day that follow you around asking you about what it was like in the Hangman 3? Because you would know better than anyone that I have any interaction with. So
I would be more interested in buying one of those shirts today, like almost ironically, or as like a weird niche collectible than I would have been at the time earnestly buying one.
Yes. I feel the same way. So this match was, I think, more exciting than I expected. When I first saw this on paper, I was like, all right, I mean, this is going to be mechanically fine, I guess. And, at the beginning, that's basically what it was. Albright was adding in a few more heel gestures, like slapping Matt Cross when he would like break a hold and bailing to the outside to high five Whitmer and Hagedorn. And Pierce, was doing his thing. Okay, so first of all, Pierce tags in and then tags out before he does anything, and then Albright does the same thing and then like Pierce like points to his head. So apparently that if you just tag in and out without doing anything, that's considered incredible mind games to be playing on your opponent. And then this is a classic Pierce thing, but I always really do like when he points to the middle of his hands and says, "This is where the power lies," because I think that's like one of the better Hulk Hogan parodies. Because like it was like when you think about it, it's just such a ridiculous thing that Hogan would say, and I like that Pierce adopted that. He should do that honestly on Raw as GM. He should just be like this is where the power lies, and then he puts the microphone into the hand that he was pointing to. Anyway,
so he moves the microphone from one hand to the other
because only one hand is where the power lies. I'm just saying. Also, I wrote at this point when the announcers were talking about how they appreciated how the fans showed up when there was a Red Sox playoffs game going on, and I was like thinking like nowadays everyone would just go to the ROH show but like watch the Red Sox game on their phones, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was also the thing we've had on one or two of these shows where like they would announce or someone would announce like during the middle of the show, the scores blank. Where I feel like now you don't need one person. Everyone would just be constantly going. There'd probably be like pops in the crowd during matches when someone like got a hit.
Yes, I agree. But the other thing I was going to say about this Red Sox thing, sorry to take away from the match for a second, but like if there was like okay, so obviously I'm from New York. I root for whatever the Yankees. Sorry, if they're in the if they're in the World Series, I want them to win. But also, like I like wrestling more and don't really care that much about sports. So there are enough people. There are 400 people like me in any city, right? That would not care that
Yeah.
much about the big playoff team. So I don't think it's like that much of a sacrifice necessarily for the people that are at the show to go to the show. Not everybody who likes wrestling is like a big baseball fan, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the match got really exciting to me when Eric Stevens got a hot tag. I thought he just really did a great hot tag. Big suplexes, the choo-choo, the TKO on Albright, with Stevens using Albright's feet to knock Pierce out of the ring. Then Cross does a big dive, and he springboards back in the ring to double stomp Albright. And then they do a few more big near falls. Whitmer trips Cross when he's going for the space flying tiger drop. Then he attacks Cross on the floor. Of course, the ref misses all of it. Stevens hits the pop-up power slam on Albright, which I thought was really impressive because Albright in this context looks really huge. And then the crowd is really into it when Albright tries to get into the cross arm breaker on Stevens. And the crowd's really into it while Hagedorn stomps Cross on the floor. And then Pierce distracts, which allows Albright to half Nelson suplex Stevens and get the win. I really thought that Stevens was really great in this match, and I think everyone else worked to keep up with him. So I think like the match ended up being like nothing special or anything, but the effort that he put in and the fact that everyone else tried to keep pace and the hot crowd, because it was a legitimately hot crowd, I thought made this a pretty enjoyable presentation. So I would describe this at the level of solid opener and also definitely more enjoyable than I thought it would be going in.
I agree with you about Eric Stevens. I think I like this match a little bit less than you. Watching this match, I don't get what the Hangman 3's in-ring identity is supposed to be because they were set up by Pierce giving us these very serious, sinister master of human psychology promos where he's talking Whitmer into joining them. And on top of that, the stable is three big boys by ROH standards, and Albright and maybe even Whitmer, I think, are best as big, angry jocks tossing people around. And then you watch this match, and even though it is funny to see Pierce do that, this is where the power lies. He's doing kind of corny stuff like that and asking for the test of strength. And Albright at one point is tagging out to avoid Matt Cross, like almost a cowardly heel, or just being like a little stinker. And then the heels are taking a double noggin knocker near the end. Like overall, I would say this is not a silly match. Those are kind of the only those spots I just named off are the only spots in the match that are like that. But I would just say the Hangman 3, when you watch this match, they don't come off as killers. They don't match the aura that I think Pierce's promos were trying to that were around the formation of the stable were trying to project. And we kind of talked about those at the time where it was weird where in the ring during that period Pierce was wrestling these kind of wacky semi-comedy matches, but then he cut these very serious promos. And while this is less wacky, I'm still like, there's some dissonance there. It doesn't feel like it kind of goes together. But as a match, it's okay. The heels isolate Cross, who eventually makes a hot tag. And I agree. I thought Stevens is already at this point a really good hot tag guy. I thought the match overall I would call average. I just felt like I saw it a million times. But I do agree the crowd was good. I do agree Stevens' hot tag was good. A couple interesting things to me were Albright at one point early on when he slaps Cross that you mentioned hard across the face, I thought it was really hard. And late in the match, Cross stomps like the fuck out of Brent Albright's head to break up a pin. And maybe it was just an accident, but I felt like if I had to start a count during Through the Years where times where Albright appeared to stiff the hell out of his opponent, and then later in the same match his opponent appeared to give him a receipt, we'd be at more than two so far. I'll just say, like, it's happened a few times, and he kind of did have a reputation for popping people. And
it's funny that I just don't notice stuff like that. Like I always goes completely over my head. Like I'm sure you're right, but I never notice like that somebody's like doing that sort of thing in a match.
And to be fair, I might not have noticed either, if not for the fact when I've done research, there was like two or three, probably at least three or four, I would say actually now when I think about it, different ROH podcasts and shoot interviews where three or four different wrestlers who all independently talked about Brent Albright and complained about him. So maybe I'm being hyper now. Like again, and maybe it wasn't that stiff a slap. Maybe that wasn't a receipt, but now maybe I'm almost now hyper focusing on things like that because I know he had a bit of a rep for that kind of stuff. But like you, I really liked it was my favorite spot in the whole match was Steven taking that big pop-up power slam on Albright. And I agree, it was so impressive that he did that. But also what I really liked about it is he kind of almost loses Albright for a second. He almost bobbles him. And then you can see him like in midair. He's like, no, I'm going to make sure I get a grip on him and turn this into a slam. And I feel like sometimes spots are almost, it doesn't always work this way, but some spots are almost more impressive if you do kind of bobble them for a second. Because it's almost more impressive that when you're dealing with a person that big in the air, that you're able to like save something that looks like it's about to go wrong, than if it just goes off completely spot on perfect. It's like, holy shit, you just kind of you muscled your way out of that problem. And I thought that was really cool.
It also makes it more realistic. It also makes it more realistic because like when it goes smoothly, there's clear cooperation there. But when it doesn't, the person clearly is having to power through themselves, which makes it more impressive.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And then my last note on this match was I thought there was a funny dumb spot near the end where Cross, when he does make his hot tag, how he gets to it is Albright German suplexes him, but Albright doesn't take the bump. He instead like full flips, lands on his feet, and then he just tags out. Except Albright, when he's about to throw the German suplex, he realizes he and Cross are aimed where the German suplex is going to throw Cross toward Adam Pearce's corner instead of towards Steven's corner. So he and Cross just do a full 180-degree turn in the middle of the ring while they're like doing in the German suplex position so that the spot can work, so it can throw Cross towards his own corner. It's one of those like, there was no reason for you to do this business exposing moment. So I just thought it was fine where they were just realizing like both of them doing like, oh shit, we're in the wrong direction. Let's scoot over. Let's Anderson Cooper. Let's half Anderson Cooper this. Let's do a 180. And so after the match, Hangman 3 celebrate, and BJ Whitmer grabs the mic. The crowd chants Steve Carino at him because with his new short bleach, if you're not watching along with us, with his new short bleach blonde look, he does kind of look a little like Steve Carino. And Albright, again, he's hamming it up at this point. He keeps yelling, "Where's Carino? I don't see him." And like Pierce has to calm him down. BJ says after all the pain and sacrifice he made for the fans, one man helped him see things clearly. There's a huge shut the fuck up chant at this point before Whitmer gives props to Adam Pearce for being the guy who made him see things clearly. BJ says the first victim of the Hangman 3 was a clown called Delirious, and tonight he wants to finish the job. He's calling out Delirious right now. Delirious runs in the ring. He takes out Albright and Pearce quickly, and then the match is on. BJ Whitmer defeats Delirious via pinfall in 9 minutes even after hitting the adrenaline spike tombstone pile driver. I thought this was right on the border of average and above average to me. It was like the first match in that I felt like I had seen a match of this type and quality so many times before, but there was just, I would say, like a little extra pep in Delirious' step. We get a brief hot start where he runs wild and he hits a big dive to the floor, and then Whitmer controls for a bit. But even when Whitmer controls, I did like the vibe of all of the Hangman 3 and Shane Hagedorn are all on different sides of the ring, and they're taunting Delirious during this. And Delirious at one point is even like reaching through the ropes and trying to take swipes of them. I did like to kind of feel that like there's this gang surrounding Delirious and really picking on him. And then when Delirious gains control, he was feisty enough that to make you think that he was mad at his opponent, which, you know, he's in a feud. That's how it should come up. Like, was it such a great performance? I was like pumping my fist going like, yeah, Delirious, get him. No, but he did stuff like 3 straight panic attacks in the corner when he normally does one. To me, the first 2 matches on the show really sum up the Hangman 3, where they're not terrible matches, but there's nothing that distinguishes them. There's nothing memorable or unique or interesting about their act. To me, they're like the MRE equivalent of heels. They're those freeze dried meals that only military and crazy survivalists eat. Those meals, like, apparently they do technically taste what they're supposed to taste like. They're not disgusting, but would you ever eat them by choice? No. And to me, the Hangman 3 on this show are like MRE heels. Like, I'm not offended by them in any way, but would I ever want of my own volition to consume them, the Hangman 3? No.
So, as far as this match goes, I think like it's another match that I liked slightly more than you. Like I think the crowd is a factor. Like I feel like it's been a long time since I've watched a singles BJ Whitmer match where the crowd cared as much as they cared about this one. And I do think Delirious did have a decent amount of pep in his step to the point where he doesn't even take off the ring jacket before hitting a bunch of pretty big spots. And the biting and the choking and the back rake, I think that helped a lot. Not that I thought this was like a very good match or anything, but another one just had more energy than I expected. I've just watched enough Delirious Whitmer singles matches in recent shows that just were not that interesting, that I felt like this one was a little more interesting. That being said, there was a little bit of sloppiness in it. Did you notice the Whitmer frog splash where he jumps so far that Delirious rolling out of the way doesn't work and Whitmer lands on him anyway, but he sells like he missed it?
Yeah, that was the thing where I was wondering, like, you're saying BJ went too far. I was like, I guess you're right. Because for some, I was like, was Delirious supposed to dodge? But I don't think he was. I think you're right that he was probably trying to correct for BJ in midair, going like, "Oh shit, he's going too far."
But then Whitmer sold like he missed it.
Yeah, it was just a very weird. Someone did something wrong, and then they miscommunicated on how they could save it.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is I'm kind of getting sick of Delirious, like, just being in a feud where like everyone's beating the shit out of him and he goes and he starts the match real hot and heavy for revenge. I feel like maybe give him a break from being so, because for a while it was the No Remorse Corps. Now he immediately goes on to a pretty intensity filled feud with the Hangman 3. Like, give him a break from these feuds for a little bit. Like, have him spaced out a little. At least the Seidel match was just like a match, even though it was not the most exciting match that we've seen. This I thought was more enjoyable than that. For example, I enjoyed this 9-minute match more than that 20-minute match. I know that Seidel had a concussion, which is an extenuating circumstance, but still.
Yeah. We then go to Bryan Danielson backstage, who is now eye patch free. He's recovered enough for that. He thanks all the people who have sent him emails and MySpace messages about his eye. What a blast from the past. He says ROH has some of the best fans in the world. He then says he hasn't forgotten about Morishima going after his eye in their last match, despite Morishima promising he wasn't ahead of time. He wasn't going to do that. Bryan said he's at a crossroads with his career. That injury was the scariest that he's ever had. Eyes are sensitive things, and I was just thinking, boy, don't I know it, Matt? Don't I know it, Brian? Because I've been going through ever since Brian's angle. My eye's been having. We've covered Brian's angle. My eye has been bothering me. But
it's like a psychic message from the past, from his eye to yours.
We need to watch things we need to watch Tolo Bellas where just good things happen to Brian then, yes. if we're connected. So he says he's glad ROH now has put him in a best of 3 match series against Austin Aries to see who is the ace of the company. He says, I'm happy because it's so easy to develop hate when you wrestle each other, but me and Austin, we don't have that. We respect each other. So Brian's almost acting in this part like, oh, this is going to be a refreshing change, the kind of refreshing change you want for Delirious, Matt.
Yes.
But Brian says he's been the main event of this company since the beginning, and if there's an ace of this promotion, it's him. But you can't just say something like that. You have to prove it. So Brian will, and he's going to earn another shot at the ROH World Championship. I thought this was a weird promo, Matt. I don't know about you. I thought Brian's energy was a little light, and not in the sense that he sounded tired, but in that he didn't sound quite as serious as he should have been, especially compared to. Oh, go on.
Well, I wrote that he didn't really sound confident behind the mic the way we've seen recently. Like, there's a lot of ums and stuff like that, and he didn't really seem to have a lot of direction in terms of where he was going. It almost reminded me of a promo that he would have cut, like, I don't know, 2003, 2004, as opposed to the more highly developed mic work that we've seen from him over the previous year or two. So that was a little bit strange to me.
TM Todd Martin.
Yeah, TM Todd Martin. TM Todd Martin.
I didn't even know
that's his name. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just, this was kind of a regression.
Well, it's especially a sharp contrast when we just watched on the very previous show him cut probably to this day one of the greatest promos he ever cut.
Exactly.
So it's weird for him to backslide so much. But maybe part of that was there was either a child or a woman letting out screams somewhere during this whole thing. It was conducted backstage. Also, I thought another weird thing about this, Matt, was Brian on recent shows, we've talked about, he's made a point to say that he can't call himself the best in the world anymore because the person who is world champion is that. And he's been showing like more humility lately in promos. So why in the hell is in this promo, he talking about being the ace of the promotion? Like, what does that even mean? Like, I guess to be generous, you could say the ace of a promotion doesn't have to be the champion or even technically the best wrestler in the promotion, just the person who is kind of
like
the face of the
franchise, as they would call it in other wrestling promotions in the past. I think it's like that, but ace became a popular term on like online communities where like, you know, Brian probably lurked and stuff like that. So I'm guessing that's where he's going with this. But I will say this, you know how I said, like, you know, we've said that Brian has felt like a little bit like, you know, less intense, a little bit nicer in his promos in the recent months compared to the way he was before. And you know how I just said that this promo was sort of like a regression? So it's sort of like instead of a regression to the mean, this promo was a regression to the nice. Just saying.
We need to edit this podcast not to remove that, but to make that the whole podcast. Just loop it. But no, see, I wondered if that was something where he was talking about the ace. Maybe that was given to him by Gable as a selling point for the match, because to me, this felt a little like the 2004 Scramble Cage Melee or whatever that show was called, where Samoa Joe, CM Punk, and Homicide had a match where the official stip for that match was whoever won it was the icon of ROH. And remember that one where Homicide won, it meant nothing, and I think him being the quote unquote icon of ROH was referenced over almost never after that. Yeah. To me, it was almost like they were trying to give this match a similar stakes of like,
but this series is for a title shot, isn't it? So it already has stakes.
Yeah, I just
despite two vegans wrestling in the match does have stakes.
Did Justin Shapiro switch bodies with you? Are the pun master?
Oh,
today.
Don't insult Justin like that. He operates on another level.
You Matt, much like on one ROH show, you are at another level tonight. You're getting that, but that brings us next to a triple threat match. Nigel McGuinness defeated El Generico and Hello Wicked in 8 minutes, 11 seconds when he pinned Hello Wicked after a Tower of London. This was originally supposed to be a 4-way with Tyler Black, but what happens is, speaking of blood-curdling screams, the Age of the Falls entrance continues to be just a woman screaming, which I just think is stupid. Jimmy Jacobs, Tyler Black, and Lacey make their way to the ring. They don't go through the entrance. They walk through the crowd and hop the guardrail. Jimmy grabs the mic and says they thought they made themselves clear in Chicago, but there's still some confusion. This is the Age of the Fall. This is not about pro wrestling or Ring of Honor, and you'd be stupid to think so, Matt. This is about a revolution. This is changing the face of our society today, is what he said.
By winning the tag team titles.
Their goal is not about 4 corner survival matches. He says Tyler Black isn't even in this match, even though I think he was booked to be in this match. They're targeting the Briscoes because they have the tag belts, and with the tag belts comes the power, and they need that power to further their revolution. Jimmy says the Briscoes don't know who the Age of the Fall are or where they are. They have an army planted throughout this building, at which point Jay Briscoe mercifully, I would say, runs in and attacks Jacobs and Black to end this. He brawls with them into the crowd and then out into the lobby of the building. Fans follow them into the lobby down the hall to watch them and cheer them on as they brawl down the hallway. We then cut back to ringside for Hello Wicked's entrance. Before we get to the match, Matt, I have to say, I don't get, I'm Ring of Honor in this era is one of my favorite promotions of all time, so I'm not this negative very often, but I think that Jacobs promo was, I'll just say it, fucking awful. You have a stable saying that tonight's match and ROH as a whole and pro wrestling as a whole do not matter to them. But at the same time, as you just pointed out, they need the ROH tag team titles to have the power to stage a revolution in I guess society? Like, it's counterproductive. It makes zero sense. It's corny as hell. And the crowd, like, even this crowd, which we both acknowledge was hot on this night, they chant shut the fuck up. But I thought even their shut the fuck up was kind of like half-hearted.
Could you imagine what Occupy Wall Street could have accomplished if anybody in that crowd were the tag team champions? I'm just saying.
It is just, I can't believe that's everyone involved in this thought this was a good idea. That no one with some modicum of power, whether it's Jimmy, Gabe, a passerby on the street, didn't say, how about you don't do this? Like, how about you frame the stable in any other way, give them any other motivation? Because it's almost like it's very, and people overuse this, but this is very Vince Russo-esque of the two things that Russo was very, very known for are both here, which is acting like wrestling doesn't matter at all, but at the same time acting like, Russo would have announcers say like those powerful belts. Like Russo was obsessed with this idea that wrestling title belts have this weird ethereal political power that he never defined, but also wrestling doesn't mean a goddamn thing. And that's what this is now at this point.
Also, if Jimmy Jacobs felt self-conscious about like the overly explainy promo he cut at Man Up, he clearly didn't feel that way yet because he's just going right on with the same themes and the same promo style. So clearly he has not been dissuaded that this was a good idea just yet.
Yeah. So, but that brings us to the match. So what was supposed to be a 4-way, we get a 3-way. What do you think about this one, Matt?
I guess the way someone would feel about this match would probably depend on what they want out of these three guys and, what they would expect out of them. Like, if you're expecting Nigel McGuinness the night before he wins the world title to do something substantive and memorable, you're not going to be happy with this match. But if you are okay with like a low stakes and low drama little piece of athletic entertainment, I think that you would enjoy it because there were a lot of fun spots and there were a lot of creative spots and it was light and went down easy and was completely forgettable, like I said. So the first thing I wrote down was, first of all, because when they announced Hollow Wicked, because they announced him being from Sleepy Hollow, because legend of Sleepy Hollow and all that stuff. But to me that's funny because Sleepy Hollow is just like a nice Westchester suburb. So like Hollow Wicked just had like a decent upbringing in went to probably a good elementary school. Like that's probably what that means about Hollow Wicked. Bobby Cruz I thought was funny because he said, it looks like we have a 3-fall match. First fall wins it. I was like, it looks like, did somebody tell you? Like, are you just going into business for yourself here? You get to decide this. Like, for all the like ROH takes things seriously, and I know we've brought it up before, but it's been a while since we've noted, ROH was often just as sloppy as other companies are when it comes to a lot of this stuff, like, let's say, the rules and how things worked. Because you'd figure that, like, he could have at least said, the referee has informed me, something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the match goes, yeah, I mean, it was just, pretty fast-paced early on. Generico teasing, diving on Hollow Wicked on one side of the ring, and then instead diving on Nigel on the other side. I'm always a sucker for those fake outs. I'm also always a sucker for Nigel's outside the ring rebound lariat, and he hit a pretty nice one on Generico. I wrote down a lot of spots here. There's a spot where Generico sets up for the haluva kick with Hollow Wicked in the corner, but Nigel is in the way. And Generico expects Nigel to move out of the way, but instead Nigel lariats Generico. Then there's a spot where Generico chucks Hollow Wicked to the floor so he can hit a top rope splash onto Nigel. There's a spot where Nigel goes for that rope straddling lariat on Hollow Wicked, but Generico comes out of nowhere with the haluva kick to Nigel in that position, which sends Nigel all the way to the floor, and then he hits Hollow Wicked with a swinging DDT while Hollow Wicked is straddling the ropes for a 2 count, which I thought was really cool. Generico went outside for the running corner DDT, and Nigel uppercutted him on the way through the ropes and then hit a Tower of London on the floor, which I just thought was another really great sequence. Then Hollow Wicked got in some good spots, a nice dive on Nigel, a big boot, and Hollow Wicked ducks a jawbreaker lariat, but then Nigel turns around and hits another one and then gets the Tower of London for the win. I thought that Hollow Wicked, I feel like this was a pretty big opportunity for him in that he was positioned almost evenly with 2 of the top guys on the indies, and he didn't look really out of place. So in that sense, it was fun. I thought Generico did some really excellent spots, so I thought it was entertaining. But like I said, like this match was just very light, not a lot of substance. Certainly didn't make Nigel seem special, like he's just very mid-card spot. Like they, I told you they kind of like de-emphasized him for a while, and it didn't really feel like they were truly building him back up. He won that four-way at the last show, which was good, but maybe some more substantive singles matches in between his previous Morishima match and the one he's going to have the following night would have been helpful to build him back up to world title status. So if any of that matters to you, this match night might not come across too well. But if you just wanted some fun spots and, a nice pace and good athleticism and, fun characters, I think this match scratched that itch.
I think I enjoyed this a little more than you. I would describe this match as like a mini hidden gem to me. Not a hidden gem, but because it's not that great. But I think it might just be a matter of my expectations being over. Like this leaped over my expectations because on paper everything about this match screams night off because this is a B show on Friday night. There's a pay-per-view being taped the next night. Nigel has a big world title match on that show. This is El Generico's first match in ROH after he hurt his hamstring pretty badly at the end of the Man Up main event on the last show. And in fact, all during ring entrances, if you pay attention to Generico, you can see him really stretching and shaking out his leg during like the entire time. And actually, apparently, the original match for the show was Claudio versus Generico again in another singles match. But after I guess the injury, they changed it to, which again would make you think, oh, this is going to be built to be kind of a night off for all of these guys, and just give them a random three-way between baby faces. And yet, I thought they went pretty full tilt right from the start, and so I would call this a mini hidden gem because it's not some classic, but I would say it's flat out good. And it's like you said, it's just a bunch of spots, but I would say it's 8 minutes of cool spots from start to finish, and you ran down the coolest ones, and in particular, I thought Generico really went the extra mile that on this night in, the situation he was in. He did not need to go where he does a crazy dive to the floor on Nigel where he twists in the air and hits him back first while still horizontal. I love that spot you talked about where Nigel cuts off Generico from doing an Olay kick, and then later when Nigel's going to do his big flying lariat to a guy straddling the ropes, Generico flies in from off screen. That was such a great camera angle to catch it, where he just appears and hits him with the kick, as he's standing on the turnbuckle. The big spot you mentioned where where Generico tries to do his standard jumping through the corner turnbuckles to do a tornado DDT on the floor, and Nigel hits the Tower of London. I thought those were like big time, really fun, inventive spots. Even stuff like Hallowicked doing a Yakuza kick to the back of Nigel's head where he couldn't see it. I thought there were some inventive kind of extra mile moments that I wouldn't expect for a match on this show with these guys on this night. Even at the end, Hallowicked kind of blocks and swerves away from the rebound Larry. When I first saw Nigel go for the rebound Larry, I was like, okay, this is the end of the match. But he actually kind of avoids it or counters it, and then they switch and have him win with the Tower of London. So I would just say whatever people think about this match, I think everyone would agree, they went harder in this match than I think they absolutely had to, and I appreciate that. I will say, I think Nigel and Hallowicked had a couple somewhat awkward looking moments together, but I do agree overall he was pushed, like he kind of belonged with them. But I thought this was a fun surprise. And, again, it's not an absolutely amazing match. And I also get what you're saying where putting Nigel in kind of a meaningless throwaway 8-minute mid-card match the night before he becomes world champion isn't exactly like bounding him into that match with a lot of momentum, but I enjoyed it for what it was. So we then go to Kevin Steen backstage. Steen says tonight is his first world title match in Ring of Honor. He tells Morishima to listen good, but then he realizes, well, actually, it doesn't matter if you listen because you can't understand what I say. So he goes to Morishima, this may just be another world title match, but to Kevin, he says, this means the world to me. 2 years ago, I came to ROH with high hopes, and those hopes were destroyed. This match, Kevin says, is his one chance to prove everyone that said he couldn't make it wrong. Morishima may be Godzilla, but Steen says he's King Kong. So, it was not Steen's best promo, but solid. And I did like it, that he was referencing, his real history with Ring of Honor. Like, the idea that 2 years earlier, I had a short run here that did not go well, and people doubted that I belonged here. And I like that he's now in a place in ROH where he's, entrenched enough and confident enough where he can reference that and be like, I'm going to prove that wrong now.
Yeah, this wasn't a great promo. It also wasn't a heel promo. There were good things about it, but there is one nitpick that I have about it, which is that Steen nor anybody else referenced that the previous match Kevin Steen had in Ring of Honor was this supposedly legendary ladder war that ended this epic feud. And shouldn't someone acknowledge the toll that match took? Especially since they're like, this match was so brutal and we're never going to have it again. Maybe one of the wrestlers could acknowledge that it happened. I don't know. It's just, I know it's a nitpick because this is a few weeks later, but do you see what I mean at least?
Yeah, there's that thing of just on to the next feud.
Yeah,
on to the next thing.
He could say we took it all out of each other for the tag team titles, and one day I'm going to win that title, but tonight I have another chance to win a title, and I'm not going to let this one go by. So, something you know what I mean? Just
I get what you're saying.
Because that match was supposed to be so epic and dangerous and important, and nobody even mentioned that it happened.
Yeah, I don't think that's an unreasonable request because it wouldn't take much, too, I think, to satisfy you, right? Mention a couple lines in start off the promo or something. You know? It doesn't take a lot.
Put the match and the feud over now that it's over. That's all.
Yeah. So next up, we have Claudio Castagnoli, escorted to the ring by Daisy Hayes, he defeated Chris Hero, escorted to the ring by the whole Sweeney entourage of Bobby Dempsey, Larry Sweeney, and Sarah Del Rey, except no Tank Tolan on this night, which is sad. I like me some Tank Tolan at ringside. And Claudio wins via pinfall at 23-26 after he hit a European uppercut. I've talked a bunch this year about Hero's 2007 act being fun but repetitive. I think I homed in on something about it with this match, man. In the old days when wrestlers worked a ton of house shows, sometimes wrestlers would try new things at the smaller shows that weren't televised, and if something worked, they'd go, well, now it's part of my act in every match from here on out. And I feel like if you watch every ROH Chris Hero match in 2007 so far, it's like being able to watch every match a wrestler worked in the house show loop during the 80s, during a certain segment of their career, because you watch these matches and every night Hero's largely doing the same act, but he'll throw one or two new things in, and if they work, they get added to the routine regularly for the next matches. And by this point in 2007, Hero had now amassed a lot of stuff in his routine. I'd say there's a good 4 minutes of Hero shtick and stalling before the match even begins. All your old favorites are here, abusing Bobby Dempsey, walking back to the entrance and pouting, getting Bobby Cruz to make funny announcements, kicking a barricade in anger, and then selling his foot. And then when he gets back in the ring and the match actually starts, I'd say we get at least another 4 minutes or more of stalling with maybe a little wrestling mixed in. And even after that, when the match quote unquote gets going, it's at kind of a laid back pace with Hero dominating and there being a lot of space for him to do a little bit of a shtick. And even when Claudio gets on offense, it's sometimes silly. Claudio early on, he gets Hero in a double knuckle lock, and he forces him to do haze by raising his hands in the air while they're in the double knuckle lock. Claudio does a thing where he runs the ropes and then just puts on a chin lock, to kind of goof around. And so in a way, this match actually kind of reminds me of another kind of house show match, which is we have no time limit, the stakes are low, let's just kind of fuck around and take our time and kind of goof off and have fun and kind of thread some wrestling throughout to justify it being a match. But even the finish kind of felt slight to me, where Hero and Claudio are fighting on the turnbuckles for a long while. Hero wins the battle, gets Claudio off the turnbuckles. He hits a missile dropkick, and Claudio just immediately pops up, no-sells it, runs, hits a European uppercut, match is over. And I was like, that's the most thought you've put into this? It just kind of felt like that kind of match, just a fuck around. Well, let's just have some fun, and we'll get to the end when we get to the end. But I think if you're seeing Hero's act for the first time, this was one of his better performances in a while. He plays all the hits, I would say. He's in fine form. The crowd, like we've mentioned, is really hot, and they're really into Hero. And he's I felt like really reflecting that back to them on this night. But to me, when we include entrances and the post-match and the match itself, we're probably talking a half an hour here. and it's just a lot of this. I mean, it's just a lot of this. And when you have Sweeney screaming at ringside that this is a grudge match, and commentary reminding us that Hero recently tried to gouge out Claudio's eye with a trophy, the match you're watching in the ring doesn't really reflect that much at all. And I think if I cut maybe 7 minutes out of this, there's a Chris Hero 2007 comedy bells and whistles match I might rate as good. Instead, this felt bloated and felt like maybe an average to me, maybe a little bit above average. I don't know. It depends on how much you value the good parts of the match, which I could talk about, but I've already rattled on. But like Matt, what do you think? Because we've seen matches like this before now, but this felt a little different to me.
Well, the last match they had at Manhattan Mayhem too, I really liked that one, and that was a lot more focused than this one, and had some heat. And Hero kind of toned back a little bit of the silliness, and here he toned it way up to the point where not just Hero, but stuff involving Sweeney, stuff involving Dempsey, and at a certain point, in the early part of the match, I was like, Claudio is the 4th most focused on person in this match at best so far. There's a lot of Bobby Dempsey stuff early. Hero was asking Dempsey to massage his lower back, but then he chops him for getting too close to his butt. There's a spot where Del Rey tries to comfort Dempsey, and we get a loud Bobby Dempsey chant, and then Sweeney slaps him and makes him do push-ups. And then Hero makes Bobby Cruz make a bunch of announcements. He makes them say, when Bobby has wrestled in 14 countries and 28 states, you can cheer him as much as you want. Until then, keep your mouth shut. So there was that. I think there was also a spot earlier where Hero told Bobby Cruz to say that although the F word is expected in Boston, he doesn't want people to say it during his match. So that was a pretty blatant prompt of a fuck you chant. So Claudio was just like, what's going on here? And then at a certain point, many minutes in, they finally do 1 minute of actual wrestling, but there's still that silly vibe, like you mentioned. There's a spot where a Hero punches Claudio and it makes a loud sound. So Hero dramatically sells his hand. That stuff I enjoyed. There was also a spot where Hero knocks a fan's hat off his head. So I was like, man, more hat play. I think this is the 3rd show in a row where some fan's hat gets involved. I feel like this is the autumn of hats. That's what I would call the autumn of 2007. But I feel like there is a spot that I have literally never seen before. So there is a pill bottle, and did that come from a fan or something, or it was
so I don't know, but what it looked like is that they were brawling at ringside. And for those who don't watch this match, and I'll let Matt tell the rest of it, but I think what happened was a fan at the front row, it looked like to me, had set a bottle, a prescription pill bottle, probably at their feet. Maybe they needed to take something out, during the show. And it apparently somehow it must have gone, maybe the guardrail got pushed back a little or something. It looked a little past the guardrail.
Yeah.
So it's just lying there in the ringside area like a prescription pill bottle. Which is so weird.
So the Sweet and Sour Ink, they say it was in Claudio's tights, and Sweetie yells, wellness policy violation. I was like, man, I hope that fan got his medicine back. But it's what if it was something that he needed, anyway. But
I don't think from watching it, I don't think that was planted. I think that seemed to me like a fan had brought that to ringside.
They didn't do enough with it for it to be a prop. I think they just were improvising, which, very good improv. They could have been on Whose Line Is It Anyway with that pill bottle. But yeah, I mean, by the end, they do pick up the pace. I do think, I do think the ending was a little bit more, energetic than you're giving it credit for. I think they had some fast-paced near falls near the end, and the match had good heat the whole way, and it was never boring. But wow, there was so much stalling and silliness, and it was so long for what it was that I would just chalk it up to just being a weird match. It was a lot. I don't think it was boring, which I guess is a compliment. But yeah, I think that's all I can say about it. I'm not really sure what else to say. I guess, just they could have, I don't know if it really fit what they were trying to go for in the feud. I guess that would be my biggest critique.
Yeah, I think the thing you could maybe say is Chris Hero's act is fun, but it's getting at times a little self-indulgent.
A
you
little.
know,
Do you remember that? Do you remember the first match he had in 2007 against Homicide?
yeah.
So
And that's
it was already pretty self-indulgent at that point.
and you mentioned it here where Claudia, like that's the problem with Heroes Act is so much of it kind of with all the stalling and wackiness kind of necessitates his opponent, which at this point was always a babyface, having to just stand there and look like a bump on the on a log in the ring for minutes at a time, just saying like, "Oh, I'm just going to let you do all this,"
Yeah.
which does kind of create a weird vibe. But a couple moments I did like in the match. Daisy put on Claudio's jacket after he took it off, and she is just swimming in Claudio's jacket. It was a very funny visual. Like she could have been engulfed and never found in Claudio's jacket. The size disparity between those two human beings. Um, and then after that, there was something that did make me laugh where Hero's done this before, but he does either what I would call a reverse worm or a series of failed kip-ups, one or the other. And Lenny just kind of somewhat like straight-laced just says, Hero's having a bit of a spasm. And I just burst out laughing, like calling it very matter of fact, a bit of a spasm. And I was like, okay, that's pretty funny. Yeah, there was a cover the Hero did on Claudio where he just puts all his weight on Claudio and he sticks his hands out in front of him and his feet out back, suspended above the mat, like he's Superman flying, which again, another ridiculous, stupid thing. And then, yeah, of course, the prescription pill bottle thing was such a weird moment. So after the match, Prazak says there's something going on towards the entrance, and we cut to the Necro Butcher and Jay Briscoe brawling in the crowd, and that brings us to our impromptu anything goes match. Necro Butcher defeated Jay Briscoe via pinfall in 11 minutes 4 seconds after he hit a sidewalk slam on 2 open chairs. Cage Match says this is 11 minutes and 4 seconds, but a good chunk of this match happens in the crowd before they get in the ring and the bell rings. So I would be going to nitpick here and say that the official match time is much less than that, but probably the amount of action you get, that probably is accurate. But yeah, what'd you think about this? Necro Butcher back in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I thought like this was tonally an appropriate follow-up to what we saw in the last show. Like it makes sense that Jay would want to do this and would be in this mood, and that Age of the Fall, like this was the only when Necro's in there, basically it's the only time that Age of the Fall really seems dangerous, I guess is what I would say. And so in that sense, it worked. Like there was a lot, especially the part on the floor, which I usually don't like, but there's a lot of punching. And Necros obviously look a mix of good and bad, which I guess is the charm of Necro Butcher. He chucks, there's obviously the problematic aspect of tons of chair shots to the head. There's a spot where Necro chucks a bunch of chairs into the ring, and including one that's handed to him by a fan. And the part where he's handed chairs by a fan doesn't really fit the storyline, right? Because their crowd shouldn't want to help him unless they're part of that Age of the Fall army that's everywhere, right? But there's a spot back in the one, but once they're in the ring, Jay does kind of, or actually before they get in the ring, Jay does kind of a delayed German suplex on Necro over the guardrail and onto the floor. So I thought that was pretty cool. Necro has like this. The announcers pointed out this really bad swollen elbow. Like I don't know if it's like staph infection or just like a bruise, or I don't know. Did you read anything ever about what that actually was?
No,
what the injury was?
I didn't, but like it was bleeding too. So part of me, I mean, they first pointed out right when he gets taken over the guardrail. So I'm thinking maybe he just landed hard on it was instant because they did. I did notice. Did you notice they did the thing that the trope you love to point out, which is the classic Gabe Sapolsky. They immediately noticed the injury the second it happened.
Yes.
Oh, look how bad his elbow is. And so maybe he just like posted his elbows down and took too much and like kind of sprained it or something. He does shake it out a little bit later in the match. So it might have happened within the match.
Yeah, he's favoring it a lot, which is like to make the Necro act like he's in pain takes a lot in this era, I would say. So obviously that was a very painful injury. There's a spot where Necro atomic drops Jay onto the back of a chair, like inverted atomic drops him, as in he drops his balls over the back of a chair, which I don't know. It seems really bad. A bad thing that I never want to have to do. And Necker actually gets a 2 count, which is like a good old fashioned DDT, which you don't see too much from him either. Then they do a bunch of moves on a pile of chairs, Tiger Driver. Jay back suplexes Necro sort of onto the chair pile. Jay hits a Death Valley driver onto an open chair, which is upsetting but cool spot. And that's when Jimmy Jacobs hits the ring. Mark comes out on crutches, throws one to Jay. Um, and then Jimmy escapes while Tyler Black attacks Mark from behind, and then Necro hits Jay with a chair and side slams him onto the back of 2 chairs for the win. I would say, like, I could see why someone might not like this. Like, there's problems, but I enjoyed it. You know, it felt pretty hate filled, which is what you want. It had pretty good heat. It was like a good kind of chaos. So I thought it was definitely better than anything we've seen so far from Age of the Fall. Uh, because they just kind of let Necro do his thing. And when Necro's just brawling, I mean, it does seem like different than everything else you see in ROH, and I think that's what you want here.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoy this match, and I agree. I mean, it's only been 2 shows, but so far I wouldn't even call Necro the MVP of the Age of the Fall through 2 shows. Through 2 shows, I would call him the OVP, the only valuable player from from the Age of the Fall through 2 shows. But it's interesting to watch a guy like Necro Butcher, who was an old pro at hardcore crowd brawls, and compare him to the average indie worker who just occasionally does one, because you watch Necro here and he takes some not fun looking and I'm sure not safe chair shots to the head. But if you watch him, he's always ducking his head at the last moment to try and take them more on the back of his head, which is, I feel like some wrestlers, they're like, if I'm going to take a chair shot, I'm just going to take it straight. And I'm sure he's taken some of those too in his life, but it definitely seemed like, yeah, this is a guy who's taken a lot of chair shots to the head. And then later on in the crowd brawl, you can see him just calmly calling spots to Jay in the crowd, like he's in the middle of Flair Steamboat. Like he's clearly calling like, hey, I'll choke you with my torn up t-shirt, and then you snap mare me over you to the floor and stuff like that, where he just feels comfortable in the crowd brawl in a way a lot of wrestlers don't. He's a resident to these kinds of matches where most wrestlers are a tourist. And once the match gets to the ring, yeah, Necro somehow fucks up his elbow. It's bleeding and swollen. And then we get final few more minutes. That becomes less. It's like this is 2 matches where the crowd brawl to start, and then the last few minutes is just like, let's get to the ring and start doing some big spots with chairs, including you mentioned some spots. There's that when Jay takes the Tiger Driver on the pile of chairs, you can see him put his hands behind his head, but he does it just a little too late afterwards. And you can almost see Jay like regret that he didn't do it sooner, because he's like, shit. If you just watch his expression, he's like, yeah, he probably wished that he had done that before it hit than right after. But yeah, I thought this was like a low good. I think it was outright good, because I find Necro brawls compelling in a way I don't find with a lot of guys doing crowd brawls. His strikes, his bumping, everything about him is just a bit off kilter and different in a way that engages me. I think that's part of like you mentioned, where, Necro, some of his punches look great, some don't. It's almost, there's an off kilter nature to what he does that is kind of the secret sauce that makes Necro compelling to watch. I did hate the finish. You mentioned it. Jimmy Jacobs runs in, and what I hated was Jimmy runs in, and Jay immediately beats up Jimmy. Jimmy doesn't get like a lick in on him, and then an injured Mark Briscoe comes out on crutches because he has a dislocated foot. He throws one of his crutches from outside the ring into the ring to Jay, and Jay, catching the crutch, distracts Jay enough to allow Necro to like attack him and get the win. And then meanwhile, the rest of the Age of the Fall attack Mark on the floor. And I thought this whole sequence made Jimmy look so stupid and weak. Like, one, it's a no DQ match. So if you're going to interfere, why not just interfere at the start? But 2, why have Jimmy come in fresh after he hasn't wrestled tonight, after Jay's worked the full match, and he gets in the ring, and immediately he gets his ass kicked by Jay, who's in the middle of like a long-ish match. If you want to protect Jay, okay, just have Jimmy go in, do something to Jay, and have him cost the match. Instead, Jacobs is like no problem for Jay. His own brother throwing him a weapon costs him the match. And I will also mention, this is now, Matt, the 4th out of the first 5 matches on the show that I've had heel interference, which is pretty damn heavy for Ring of Honor. So I enjoyed the match, but all of the Age of the Fall stuff on this night was really, we're not done it even, is just hitting the worst notes to me.
Except Necro, who makes it feel like what it should feel like.
Exactly. So After the match, the Age of the Fall, and this is what I'm referencing, they carry an unconscious Mark Briscoe to the back. The students try, Jay isn't aware this is going on because he's still selling in the ring. Students are trying to help Jay get up. He eventually does get up, but he's like shoving, the students like a wounded animal. He's all angry and doesn't know what's going on. And I will just say, I mean, okay, we'll get acknowledged later, but it's another thing that feels you talked about sometimes Ring of Honor can feel corny. Ring of Honor usually doesn't feel corny like this. Again, very Russo-esque, like, we don't get a resolution to a on-screen kidnapping by the end of the show. Like, it feels kind of just.
Well, I would
goofy.
say it's even worse than that, but I'll get to that in an upcoming segment.
Yeah. Okay. We then join Rebecca Bayless backstage because it's intermission time, and angry Larry Sweeney almost immediately interrupts her. He says he saw the videotape. Hero had the match won tonight on a backslide. He's just going to have Ref Todd Sinclair's job. Larry says he's very important. He makes deals with Vince. At which point, Jay storms in demand to know what happened to Mark. Like, where's my brother? And nobody knows. And so, yes, Jay is now on the search for Mark Briscoe.
So here's what I would say now. Somebody backstage at Ring of Honor should take Jay aside and be like, Jay, Age of the Fall are going to have a match right now. Go out to the ring now so you can, and find someone to help you so you can make them show you where Mark is, right? Like, he's like wandering around looking, and it's like they're coming, they're like scheduled to have a match next, so you don't have to like go look for them. They're coming out. You know what I mean? Like, because the way it ends up going is that Jay ends up coming out at the end of their match. But if someone in Ring of Honor was just like a good person, they could have just said they're actually going to be out like next, so you could just meet them out there.
This almost reminded me of the last show where we did a lot of background into the formation of Age of the Fall, and I found that Jimmy Jacobs interview quote where he said that at first his initial idea was on the debut of Age of the Fall, he wanted there to be some kind of literal magic around their debut, and I feel like we're starting to see maybe the bad end of Jimmy Jacobs' ideas here, as he's now transitioned to, okay, if not magic, we'll do a kidnapping.
Yeah, exactly.
So that brings us to the Age of the Fall. Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black, they defeat Ernie Osiris and Mitch Franklin in a minute 58 when Black pins Franklin with a small package driver.
I do like that their music is just somebody screaming. I found it extremely funny. I know it's not. I know they're not going for funny, so that's bad. But I found it very funny.
Yeah, like if all of this was meant to be a parody, almost like Hero is a parody of Spot Monkey, hip, cutting edge indie flip wrestlers. If Age of the Fall was meant to be like a parody of what a 13-year-old thinks would be a cool, edgy wrestling stable, then some of this stuff is genius. I don't think that's what the more I rewatch of this stuff, I don't think that was the intention. I think this was earnestly supposed to be like considered edgy and cool. It isn't, not at all. But before the match, Jimmy gets on the mic yet again. He says ROH told them if we want a shot at the tag titles, we need to start getting wins. So that starts tonight. This is just a squash, but you do get a couple wild showcase moves back to back. Black sits Ernie Osiris down in a chair, sitting him down in a chair on the floor, and Jacobs does a dive over the top rope onto him while he sits in the chair, which I think he's done before, but it's a really cool spot. And then right afterwards, Franklin tries to do a dive to the floor, and Tyler Black catches him, does a huge running power bomb with a lot of momentum into the barricade. I thought, okay, though, I was like, other than the Necro performance, that was the one moment tonight where Age of the Fall seemed cool. Those two spots back to back, like, okay, they do kind of seem like killers and cool in that moment. But then during this match, Jimmy has the camera. He literally during this match tells the camera, look over here to show one of the Age of the Fall's followers in the crowd, which is once again just an average looking fan with a bandana over his face, being pretty well behaved. And during commentary, Lenny is talking about the Age of the Fall being a movement. And again, I'm sorry, this is unbelievably cringe. I guess that the idea is supposed to be that it's not just a wrestling stable, that they've got all these fans that are part of almost like a cult in the crowd of every show. But every time they cut to them or anytime they try and have them involved, it's just the most cornball thing. So I'll ask you your thoughts in a sec, but I'll wrap this in. After the match, Jimmy refuses to release Osiris from a guillotine choke until Jay Briscoe runs in, demanding to know where Mark is. And Jimmy and Tyler run to the entrance, and Jimmy's taunting Jay, going, "Where's your brother?" And I was just like, again, like, someone should call the cops. Like, what the fuck? Like, it's such a weird, dumb thing for Ring of Honor. I could not, they could not, other than the Necro thing, have a worse follow-up to the initial angle.
It's definitely weird to have characters kidnap somebody and then they're just like, okay, time for a match. Like, like, suit up. We got to wrestle Ernie Osiris now. I will say that it was somewhat a good showcase for Tyler Black, and it is interesting to see he was, especially young Tyler Black, such an impressive athlete at that point, and he was, less than a year away from becoming somebody that Gabe was planning on putting the world title on soon. Obviously, changing Booker changed those plans for a while, but still, like, it just he makes an impact right away. So that is one positive that comes from this.
And the small package driver, that's a really cool move, too.
It's a really cool. I wonder if he went to AW, if he would just bring that move back.
Yeah, I wonder if that's, I guess, one of those things that, like, Steen's package pile driver, they just didn't like the drivers. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that brings us to the best of 3 series, match number 1. Austin Aries defeated Bryan Danielson via submission in 24-36 when he made him tap out to the last chancery. I thought this was great. I had a blast watching this. In fact, this was, I looked it up, Danielson and Aries' 6th singles match together in ROH, if you count when they got to be the final 2 in Survival of the Fittest 2004 as a singles match. And this might be the most fun I've had watching them wrestle each other since that first match at Survival of the Fittest. So much of this match is mat work and holds. I'd say most of the first 10 minutes. And then even after that point, they keep going back to mat work and holds throughout the rest of the match. But it's so fucking fun, and the crowd is into it. It's snappy, brisk. I don't need to say brisky. Brisk moves onto the where they keep moving on to the next idea. There's a bunch of fun new things and twists in it, like Bryan Aries have each other in simultaneous leg locks, and then they roll to the floor while they're still holding them and keep holding them on each other even when they get to the floor. They work a test of strength, I think like 3 different tests of strength on the show, and but they really work it. Like, for them, it's not jokes. They're like really struggling at it, which I thought was cool. Aries head scissors Bryan for once, when normally everyone head scissors, Austin Aries, which I thought was fun, and Bryan trying to work his way out of it. Bryan, at one point, he's in an armbar, so he gets up. Aries still has him in the armbar. He runs up the turnbuckles, tries to do an arm drag, like jumping off the turnbuckles to get out of the armbar, and Aries just holds on the armbar the whole way, which I thought was really cool. At one point, Bryan tries to get Aries in a surfboard, but he can't. So he does this crazy single leg crab instead, where his foot is in like the back of Aries' knee. Like, just really cool, like on the fly. Okay, I'll think of something else then. Bryan does at one point this standing snapmare that's almost like a slam, the way he throws Aries down. And Bryan even does this crazy combo crucifix crossface. It's like both at the same time that he transitions into a cool looking pin. So many cool moments. Those were just some I jotted down. And then when they get to the final few minutes, even though it does at that point become more of the traditional, we're going to trade signature moves to each other, the way they worked it felt like such a struggle, like with things like how hard Aries has to fight out of Bryan's triangle choke. And when Aries wins with the last chancery, he has to apply it. Then after a while, Bryan's fighting through it. So he lets go for a second, throws knees to Bryan's head, reapplies it, and then Bryan finally eventually gives up. And that also has to be one of the first times Aries has won with the chancery, the last chancery in ROH, because the announcers don't even have a name for it yet. And the crowd's going nuts for the final minute. It's just great. And I will say, I'll just sum it by saying, going into this match on rewatch, because I didn't remember this match at all, I had preemptive Bryan and Aries fatigue. I thought, I know this match will be good, but I've seen these two wrestle each other so much. But I don't know if it's just 2007 Bryan working his magic, but sometimes in 2006, there'd be a little bit of a dull early section of some of his matches that felt like Bryan just dicking around to lengthen the match. And what I can say about this match is it's over 24 and a half minutes with a ton of mat work, and I wouldn't cut out anything from it. Every minute to me was fun. I liked the start and the middle as much as the finish section. Any trace of busy work here didn't feel like busy work. It felt like busy fun to me, I guess. I would say, like, this is not a classic, and I don't know if I can even call it a hidden gem, but Well, maybe I can't call it a hidden gem because I don't think he'll distinctly, even though it wouldn't surprise people to hear that a Danielson Aries match was really good. I don't think people distinctly remember this match out of all the Danielson Aries matches. And I thought this was great. I thought this was just top notch professional wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely a hidden gem, at least as far as like the pantheon of Bryan Danielson matches, in that like no one ever really talks about it, and I don't think it's well remembered. But yeah, I mean, it's just like this is just like what you love Ring of Honor for, right? Like matches like this are why ROH needed to exist in 2007. Just like two of the best wrestlers in the world that really couldn't get a chance to do a match like this anywhere else, and they just bring the best out of each other. I think it's, yes, part of it is that 2007 Bryan Danielson, and I said this for a long time, up until like very late in his career, was in the ring my favorite Bryan Danielson. I feel like he just cut out any semblance of fat in his work, and just everything was just done to perfection. And I actually think this era of Austin Aries is very underrated as well. Like the era where he comes back from TNA and he's very motivated. And also I think like there's like Danielson can bring certain things out of other wrestlers that they don't get a chance to do with anyone else. In this case, it's like the mat wrestling. You don't really ever get to see Aries do mat wrestling to this degree, except when he's wrestling Danielson, and he's good at it. And I feel like AJ Styles is similar, right? Like AJ, when he wrestled Danielson, would do like really cool mat wrestling stuff and really never against anyone else, right? So like I think that they, complement each other really well. I think the early mat work was actually in some ways my favorite part of the match, but I also loved the final sequence just like you did. There was one spot that I found kind of funny, which is even though Aries is a babyface, he does take a moment to call a fan a dumbass for saying that his chin lock on Danielson was a choke. And I was like, was that the real Aries shining through? Like, or what?
I love that he, like, I've been writing lately about like stuff like Shawn Michaels in the mid 90s, and how there are certain wrestlers, like I think Shawn Michaels, we saw it with CM Punk and Austin Aries, have that gene where if a fan says something, like they can't help themselves. They can't ignore it because, he literally says to the fan who's just, it's a choke. He angrily shouts to him, it's on his chin, dumbass.
Yeah.
Like, I love that he just couldn't let it stand.
I know.
No, fuck you. I'm doing this right. I'm not, even though I'm a baby face.
And it's fake, right? And it's like, he's not like, like, who cares? Then, like, I also really like that, like Danielson, you probably mentioned some of this, but Danielson locking on this leg hold, it just looks really painful where he, like, digs his foot into the back of Aries' knee and pulls back. Like, making that snap mare look devastating. Like, why doesn't he do that more often? Why doesn't anyone do that more often? Like, it's so impressive how Danielson can make these basic moves devastating. Like, have you ever seen anyone do a snap mare like that?
No, it's like halfway between a snapmare and a slam. It was really cool.
Yeah. Like he always,
sometimes when he's.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, sometimes when you see Danielson do stuff like that, or like that submission you talked about, it's almost like, did Bryan even intend for these things to come off the way they do? Because he'll do little variations of things where it's just a little different, and he'll never do it again.
That's what's it's amazing about that he does that. He's like that. Like it's like that's why people say he's just like such an artist. Some would call him the second best wrestler of all time. I really did enjoy basically the debut of the Last Chancery as a finisher. I know he's done it before, but like this is clearly its coming out party, and it's a really great way to get a new submission over. This match was awesome. Danielson brings something out of Aries no one else does. I honestly don't even know like who I'm more impressed by here, because obviously Danielson's always amazing, but Aries really stepped up his game for this match, and I think had his best match in, gosh, I can't even tell you how long. I was just very impressed. This was definitely a great match that everyone who likes ROH should see at some point.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up a couple of things, because like I was focusing a lot on Bryan because we're big time Bryan Danielson fans, in case you haven't noticed on this show. But I'm glad you highlight Aries too, because I agree that Aries kept right up with him in this match. He was right there with him, contributing to this match being so good. And I will also say, like, that thing you said, like, I was thinking about that when I was watching the match, where one of the fun things about doing Through the Years is sometimes, like, even though we both watched this era of Ring of Honor as it happened, my memory is really bad. Yours is somewhat better than mine. And sometimes you'll call things, and most times, like, they do come true. So it's almost like you're spoiling things to me that I've already seen. And then I'll watch things, I'll be like, I'll remember the podcast where you told me that, and be like, yeah, oh, Matt's right again. And you called, like, a while ago, Bryan Danielson 2007 being like a noticeably better wrestler, and even though everyone remembers his 2006 run, and this was one of those matches where, as I was watching, I was like, I remembered you saying that, be like, this is like a textbook example of your point. And you mentioned too, I'm glad, like you mentioned, it just feels like he cut out the fat, where he's still Bryan, but it might not be a perceptible change to people that are just drop in. But if you're watching everything like we are, it just feels like when he came back, there was a certain level of understanding of, like, I don't even need to dick around. Like,
yes,
there's a little more confidence in an already very confident wrestler.
It's the 2007 Bryan Danielson in ROH is the closest thing to if you've watched like AEW Bryan Danielson. Like, I think like those are two very comparable versions. Like, I think the older version has elements of being older and more of that, like, the history that goes along with that, but the actual, like, things they try to do in the ring moves wise, it's as similar as any two eras that I could think of.
And finally, when Dave Prazak is early on talking about all the matches Aries and Bryan have had against each other, he says ROH historians will note their early matches, and I just wrote my notes. Matt, are we ROH historians?
I mean, I think as far as this goes, we have to be, right?
Yeah.
Like,
finally, I'm a historian.
Yeah, you might be the foremost ROH historian, at least in terms of, like, this era.
I think in this era, I would trust you, because I don't remember half of the stuff sometimes people come up to me, like, not come up to me in person, but like online, and say, oh, I just listened to this episode, I'm way behind. And they'll say, Razzmatazz. And I'll be like, what the fuck is that? like they'll say something and I won't remember what it was.
Razzmatazz.
It might just be months earlier, some joke we said, and I don't remember it.
I would say that probably, as far as people that I interact with, Jeff Schwartz is one of the best ROH historians that I know. And he knows all the eras, whereas I think, at least for me, I mainly know this one. I don't know about you.
And obviously Shane Hagedorn is literally writing the book on this.
Yes, era, Shane Hagedorn is ROH historian plus, because he was also, heavily involved in it for a time.
Yeah. So after the match, we get a big ROH chant and Bryan and Aries shake hands. So it is kind of nice that we, we're getting this, as Bryan talked about earlier, that, at least at this point, it's a very gentlemanly feud. During, this show had a lot of interference and a lot of classic heel heat to get, like, not just a match at another level of quality, but a match that's just about, like, these two guys don't hate each other right now. They're fighting very hard for something important, and
which again is why we loved ROH. Like, that's like that kind of stuff.
So we then immediately cut to Aries backstage. So ROH was on this show doing, and we'll see this, doing a little bit again of, Gabe's recent trend of, do I do immediate post-match promos with the winners of matches? Aries is saying, a lot of people are telling me that I owe a lot of my success in ROH to Bryan Danielson. And Aries goes, I can't disagree. He calls Bryan the best in the world. And he says, working against Bryan forces me to raise my own game. And Aries says, Bryan's going to give me one more thing after all the things he's given me. He's going to give me another shot at the ROH title, through winning this 3-match series with him. He says that he's not going to say he's going to beat Bryan 2 straight, because he's not the Briscoes, and Bryan is a hell of an athlete, but he's getting his world title shot once again. And a somewhat, like, interestingly, Bryan rubbing off on him being like a somewhat modest for Austin Aries promo to basically be like, Bryan's the best in the world. He makes me raise my game. I might not even beat him in the next match. Like,
that was the weirdest line where he's like, you're the best in the world, so I'm not going to go 2-0 against you. I'm like, what? You're predicting you're going to lose the next match? Like, what?
Yeah. Maybe Bryan's spirit went to every
I know.
Yeah, I might lose the whole thing. I might blow it.
He snap-mared him into self-deprecation.
So that brings us to our semi-main event. The Vulture Squad, Jack Evans, Jigsaw, and Ruckus, defeated the No Remorse core of Davey Richards, Rocky Romero, and Roderick Strong in 14 minutes, 46 seconds when Evans pinned Romero after hitting the 630 splash. This is the Vulture Squad's first match as a team, as a 3-man unit. And I have a couple things to say before I throw to you, Matt. First would be, they announced Jigsaw between the last show and this show as a member of the Vulture Squad online in an ROH Newswire message board post.
I know he just came out with them. Like, if you it was just the way it's just funny. I don't know what to say.
Like, on one hand, I get fearing that shooting an angle for Jigsaw joining, being the next member of the Vulture Squad, may have seemed a little anticlimactic when ROH had only used him as a very low-level guy thus far. But it still, I felt like, made him seem smaller, as like less impactful. It's just, oh yeah, we announced online he's joined the team.
But on the bright side, there were 3 separate comments where somebody says he's the final piece of the puzzle, and but only Lenny Leonard had the gall to follow that with no pun intended.
I love that everyone. I wonder if there is any other Jigsaw puns people could like. That was like the go-to thing. I wonder how many times in his life or during his matches Jigsaw has been the recipient of "he's the final piece of the puzzle" or "he found the final piece of the puzzle" or something like that.
Or when he eats like a square pizza, or they're like, "Do you want the edge piece?"
The final pizza of the puzzle.
Oh, I was talking about just the edge piece because that's how people usually start their Jigsaw puzzles. Anyway,
so yeah, especially when you consider like how they formed the No Remorse Corps and the Resistance, where I think every single member of both of those stables, they got at least some minor, if not significant, angle for every member to join. Where this is the only member of any of these tables, I feel like, where it's just, yeah, we announced it online. You should look it up. And also, now that this is the complete form of the staple, the Vulture Squad. The composition we got to talk about for a second is just a little weird. Where, like, Jigsaw, he does do some flying, so he does fit in the sense of that the Vulture Squad is a high-flying stable, but he just doesn't feel like a natural fit image-wise with everyone else, where it's like masked Chikara guy with Jack Evans, with Julius Smokes, with Ruckus. That just feels like a very odd mix of human beings, other than the fact that they do fly.
Maybe it would have worked better if they all wore either Jigsaw puzzle-themed outfits or bird costumes.
Just call them like 4-piece puzzle.
Yeah, a 4-piece puzzle. Or on the other hand, they could all wear bird costumes.
Get
whoever made the gobbledygooker suit to make the Vulture Squad suits.
I like the idea that only one person can make a good bird suit, and it's whoever made the gobbledygooker.
I like that idea
talent.
Too. Yes.
But my last thing is, we're having a fun show today, but my last thing is they come out to "We Fly High" by Jim Jones, which for people who know is the Ballin' song. And look, the title, again, perfect for a high flying stable. And I know
also birds.
Yeah, exactly. So I know Smokes is managing the Vulture Squad, so there's some continuity there. But that song to me was such a big part of the iconic, I dare say, ROH moment where Homicide won the world title at Final Battle 2006, and then the entire roster celebrates to that song, and that had been the only time that song had been used in ROH. I feel like when I heard them come out to that song for their theme here, I was just like, could you have just left the memories alone, guys? Like, you couldn't have found any other song that would have been appropriate. Like I just felt a little like, I don't know. That's probably something that only bugs me. But overall, Matt, what do you think about this match? And any thoughts about now that we've seen them, now that they have transformed the Vulture Squad?
Well, all that oddness aside, I'm very curious to hear what you think of this match, because I, have had some No Remorse Corps versus their 3-man rivals fatigue, because I think some of those matches, were a little bit boring. Some were good, some weren't. And so I wasn't like super stoked for this match, but I have to say, I had a lot of fun watching it. And, again, the hot crowd helped, but it felt like everyone was on. Davey Richards has ditched the Benoit gear, and now he's just in plain black trunks and plain black boots. So I think he's going for, I don't know, Stone Cold Steve Austin, maybe. No, just kidding. But, everyone was kind of playing to their strengths here. We got some segments with Strong versus Evans where Strong was doing, the crazy bends on Evans that he likes to do, where he gets Evans back under the bottom rope and bends his legs over the top rope, which still is insane. There's the springboard neck breaker that Evans hits on Strong, and then every time Strong Evans or one of the Vulture Squad members does something, one of the other No Remorse core members is in there to hit them from behind, do a crazy kick, do a really hard strike, some sort of flying something or other. This match has scramble rules, so everyone's in and out very quickly. But there is a segment as part of the match where they really cut off Evans in the No Remorse core corner, and then by the end, it turns into a really fun 6-man showcase of just big moves. Strong catching Evans on the handspring elbow, driving him face first into the mat. The big running kick by Richards into Evans's chest. Richards hits Strong escapes to the floor, and then Jigsaw does a leaping flip, and then Richards immediately follows that with his really great tope where he flips almost all the way over. Then Ruckus hits a flipping dive, then Romero hits a springboard splash, then Evans hits his own crazy twisting springboard, and the crowd goes crazy. And then Evans crosses himself before covering Roderick, and Roderick kicks out. So as far as I could tell, this was an unanswered prayer. There's a spot where Strong reverses a move and lifts Evans onto his shoulders, but Evans hits a sudden reverse Rana, and then Ruckus and Jigsaw follow with consecutive top rope splashes on Strong. There's some pinning sequences with Jigsaw and Richards, and then Strong lifts Jigsaw right into the alarm clock, and Strong follows that with a gutbuster, and then Richards and Romero do springboard knee strike powerbomb combination on Jigsaw, and I thought that was the finish, but Ruckus saved it. And then Ruckus hit a handspring on Richards, but Strong hit a sudden big boot, and then Evans hits him with a sudden knee, and then Jack hits the Tree of Woe double knees on Romero, and then Ruckus immediately follows that with a coast-to-coast flip dive, and Evans follows that with the 630 and gets the win. So, yeah, I actually, for some, given the booking, I kind of didn't expect Vulture Squad to win here, which obviously they should have, but the way things went with the resilience, I wasn't expecting it. So the match was, I think, definitely unlike anything else on the show. More entertaining than almost any of the No Remorse Core versus Resilience matches. And the Vulture Squad won in their debut match. So I didn't really have any complaints. I thought this was a lot of fun. I don't know. I just had a good time watching it. I think that everyone was performing well here.
Matt, when you're right, and you're right here because I was surprised and pleasantly surprised, just like you were. Like you said, Lenny says on commentary that this is scramble rules, and I would say this is kind of like a hybrid between a scramble and tag, where the opening few minutes are right from the jump, crazy, everyone going in doing crazy spots like you're watching a scramble, and the back stretch of the match is like that. And then in the middle, between those two scramble segments, you get one long, as you said, Jack Evans face in peril sequence, which is also fun because it's fun seeing, Jack Evans really get destroyed. That's how I like my Jack Evans, which I know that sounds weird. It is weird, but it's also true. And, at certain moments, it does almost feel like a poor man's Dragon Gate 6-man, where just the pace and the sheer amount of stuff that they're doing, poor man's in that the execution is maybe not going to be quite as sharp as Dragon Gate. There's going to be some guys, if you watch this, looking for someone else to get in position occasionally. And on that late match dive train, it looked like almost no one got caught well. I was like, man, you guys are all kind of just falling through people, I would say. But I think as an in-ring intro to the Vulture Squad, this was pretty successful. It doesn't spotlight any one member in particular. I don't think there's one standout star of the match from their team. But all three, I think, together create this combined impression that you're going to see all the flips when they wrestle. Like Ruckus brings the cooler looking offense. Jigsaw, I would say, has the tightest mechanics of the three. The No Remorse Core, you talked about getting fatigue from watching them in matches against the Brazilians. They're a great stylistic counter. I think that the Vulture Squad freshens them up because, their hard kicks and strikes really play against more, less stocky high flyers that are maybe a little more used to playing the underdog. And I wrote just like I wrote my notes just like you. I said, hey, a new stable wins their first match together. That's good. Because yeah, like I was not, I wasn't necessarily thinking, at the time, probably going into this, I would have been like, that would have been an open question. And no, they do the right thing here. The stable is fully formed. They get a good, fun, clean win in their first match. I thought this match was good. Like, that's how I'd rate a really strong, like 3.5 stars. I also think this was put on a good spot in the card where it's a palate cleanser between two weightier singles matches. Aries and Danielson's more about technical craftsmanship and building something throughout the match. And this is turn your mind off, all bright, shiny explosions from the beginning. And I think that can be a good way to structure shows sometimes, to stagger the matches that require some patience or more emotional investment with the ones that don't. And now, sometimes if you don't have the right matches, the big flashy matches can burn out the fans on the matches that surround it. But I don't think that happened on this night. And I actually, watching this show, I really like the effect of seeing Aries and Danielson and then going right into this. I was like, oh, that's kind of refreshing to get these two really quality matches back to back, but they're in such complete different worlds. They're not even close to competing with each other. They're completely two different animals. But we cut to the Vulture Squad backstage. Jax asks us if we saw their teamwork. Jax says, I only pick the top. He calls Jigsaw, you guessed it, the final piece of the puzzle. Ruckus says, we can win over any fucking crowd. And then he calls the team three of the craziest motherfuckers. We're coming for those tag straps. And I just wrote my notes, sweary McSwearson over here. I think I didn't notice how little ROH wrestlers swear in their promos. I don't know if that's a company edict or not until, Ruckus dropped 2 F-bombs within like 10 seconds of each other. I was like, oh, that doesn't happen in Ring of Honor, actually. And maybe he didn't get the note. You can't take the CZW of the CZW man. But, so Jack tells him, come on, it's time to get our smoke on. Matt, I don't know if you know this, they like the weed in the Vulture Squad. That's another way they fly high. There's a triple meaning, Matt. They're birds, they're high flyers, and they're high flyers.
The most important part of what you just said is that they are birds.
And so they're not brawling birds. They're flying birds. They're like Noel Gallagher. They're high flying.
Right. They're not birds. They're not birds in the British sense of the word. They're birds in the animal sense of the word.
Yes. And that brings us to the main event, your ROH World Title match. Takeshi Morishima successfully defends the title when he defeated Kevin Steen via pinfall in 18 minutes, 27 seconds after he hit a backdrop driver. This is the Morishima versus all of ROH's heavyweights tour. It continues here. Steen jumps Morishima before the bell, which ironically means, Matt, for the first minute of this match, Kevin Steen is wrestling a chunky man who is wearing a t-shirt. And the opening minutes of this match, this is as dominant as we've seen Morishima, which is something that I've said a few times lately. It feels like that was a record that seemed to keep getting broken late in his reign of how vulnerable Morishima could be at different moments in his matches, which I guess plays into the story they were trying to tell, especially during commentary on this match. They were really trying to tell the story of Morishima's weakening during this reign. He's getting more vulnerable. Like, I think Lenny was even talking about how hard it is to fly when you're a man of Morishima's size, like from across from Japan, like just try and just sell the fatigue and the strain of being champion. And so Steen gets almost all the offense at first, and then really goes to town working over Morishima's knee, including a couple spots that were very Kevin Steenish, where, at one point he throws a chair in the ring. The ref gets distracted, presumably. We don't really see it, getting that chair out of the ring. And so while the ref is distracted, Steen grabs a second chair and hits Morishima in the leg with it, which, I thought was a good kind of devious move. Steen actually bites Morishima's knee, which I would say doesn't really hurt that much. Your knee is...
Yeah, it's a different kind of injury. It is but a flesh wound.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a moment I really liked where Steen does a drag and screw with Morishima, and Morishima falls on top of Steen, and it was almost like, Morishima was just going to go down in the natural way, and they weren't really prepared for it. That's what it felt like to me. But Steen just rolls with and sells, like, oh shit, it hurt me, that this big man fell on me, even though I just landed a move on him. And he actually works Morishima's leg for so long that at one point in this match, Morishima starts getting a chant for his, they're chanting his name. And it felt like it was out of sympathy, which might have been the only time in this entire reign so far for Morishima that he was put in a position to receive one of those kind of, come on, Morishima, we know you're hurting, make a comeback, buddy, like reactions. Because he's almost never in, even when he's taking offense, never in that, kind of really up against it position. I felt like Morishima's selling was inconsistent. He actually collapses once or twice, which was cool, but also there was a lot of time on offense where when Morishima was on offense, where you would never know that his leg was the story of this match. Once Morishima makes his first comeback, this match becomes more back and forth, but Steen still gets a lot, and Steen pulled out a lot of flying in this match. He was almost a member of the Vulture Squad. He dove over the top rope to the floor early. He did a springboard cross body off the turnbuckles. He hits a senton and a frog splash back to back for a big near fall, and he also even pulls out his moonsault, but Morishima rolls out of the way. He basically does like every high flying move he knows how to do almost at this point. He just empties the flying tank here. Morishima brings what I felt like what Morishima usually brings, but I thought in particular he hit an awesome running boot right to Steen's face when Steen was staying in the corner. I thought was one of the best running boots I've seen Morishima hit, and he hit some good ones. I also enjoyed him German suplexing Steen. I like big boy on big boy suplexes, so I thought that was fun to see. And yeah, Morishima wins the match his usual way. He catches Steen with a huge lariat and then he backdrop drives him. I thought this was another strong 3.5 star match. Like there were a couple slowish spots in the body of the match, and I wouldn't say it fell into the kind of groove of Morishima versus Claudio or Morishima versus Albright or reached the level of quality of those matches. But on paper, I almost would have thought there would have been some potential for there to be a styles clash between Steen and Morishima. And watching the match, it turned out more than fine. There wasn't a styles clash. They worked fine together. And so yeah, not a great oh my god you gotta see it match, but a good solid main event.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because like this was obviously a very good match, but probably one of the lesser Morishima title defenses that we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of funny because Steen's really good. Probably, I'd argue better than Brent Albright, or Eric Stevens, but I still would say those two matches I liked a little more than this, but this was still very good. Well, one thing that made this match different is that, Kevin Steen is a heel. And even though like he was sort of by the end positioned as a babyface because the crowd wanted to see a title change, he did, get to do some heel spots. Like you said, getting some sympathy on Morishima. There were both guys got the opportunity to do like methodical control segments where they worked over their opponent. And Steen was more heelish. He did the stuff that he would do against the Briscoes where he would mock them for, he would mock Morishima's leg pain. He, like you said, bit Morishima's knee. There was one spot where he did a little jig after he hit a move, which, was a fun way to taunt the crowd. And then Morishima did his own like slow, methodical working over. And then, by the end, it was basically what you typically get. The big difference is, and I think the thing that helped Steen get that babyface reaction at the end is that Generico pops out at ringside at the end, right after a Steen locks in the Scorpion Deathlock for the first time. Generico's there and he starts smacking the mat and encouraging Steen. And Steen gets some ole ole chants directed at him, which he actually tells the crowd to shut up about. So he's still trying to be a heel. But I mean, it is rare that you get a spot where like when Steen hits the superplex and then Morishima pops up, so Steen spine busters him. That near fall got the biggest pop of the match and actually got a bullshit chant from the crowd for saying that Steen didn't, that Morishima actually didn't kick out. So the crowd really was wanting this title change. And, I think this was just a great crowd because, even though Morishima always is able to get the crowd to believe by the end, I still don't think that this match and a lot of other places would have gotten the reactions and the belief that the title change could happen here. The way it does by this crowd. So I'd say not Morishima's best title defense, but still good. And I like that Steen didn't change his character really at all, but he still allowed himself to be positioned as a babyface in the final moments, which allowed the match to build excitement. And also, I think, was sort of the very, very beginning stages of what would be a turn for Kevin Steen.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the Generico thing because I thought Generico was great, especially for a guy whose face is partly covered. As when he ran down there, he was so animated. Like he was great as just like a baby face doing the old like, come on, buddy, like do win one for the Gipper, like kind of. He was great at that, and yeah, really got the crowd riled up again. Um, so playing into that, after the match, El Generico steps in the ring and he checks on Steen. He riles up the crowd to give Kevin a round of applause, and he helps Kevin up to his feet. But then Kevin gets angry once he's helped up to his feet, and he shoves Generico away. Generico offers Steen a bottle of water, and Steen takes it. He just throws it in Generico's face and shoves him again. He yells for Generico to leave him alone. He walks to the back and he's yelling, "I don't need you. I need you like I need herpes." And the crowd, meanwhile, they're loudly olaying for Generico. And Generico is alone at ringside and he's looking so sad, like just a scalded dog. And the camera just zooms on him, and we fade out on a very sad El Generico, which was like a very weird, like, downcast like kind of moment like I get it's maybe adding some intrigue, but it was just like you don't normally see a Ring of Honor show just end on a sad man like oh and
Well,
and also we don't know if Mark Briscoe's dead or alive. Like, no update, so what a show Matt, who wins the Matt F trophies at Mark Briscoe in memoriam? Like who?
So it is. So I was, there's a lot of temptation to give it to Bryan Danielson, but he wins it a lot. And so I decided this time I was going to give it to Austin Aries because even though I'm not saying he was necessarily the better performer in that match, I really was impressed with how he stepped it up and really put on a performance that was pretty memorable. And which he really hasn't had the chance to do in a while. And I was just very, very impressed how he debuted the new submission, how he really amped up the intensity, really kept up with Bryan on the mat. It's just a version of Aries we haven't seen in a while, and I thought it was real fun to watch. And it was the best match on the show, and I think that, he was just as big of a part in it as Bryan was.
If Danielson had won first place in Greatest Wrestler, the online Greatest Wrestler Ever poll that just happened, you would have given it to him, but he's let us down. Second's not good enough in this family, Bryan. For those who don't know, Terry Funk won that poll, and very deserving. And second second for every wrestler ever is very good. But it's funny. We were talking about plugging our old 6-hour Danielson show, and I said jokingly to Matt, "Fuck, we can't do it now."
Trevor, will you reveal who you think is the greatest wrestler of all time?
You know what? I've become agnostic to that as I get older because it depends on my mood and my stuff. But I will tell you every favorite wrestler I've ever had. Okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, so when I was a kid, first favorite wrestler of all time, Bret Hart. Canadian. Maybe proud to be Canadian as sad as that is. When I was a little kid, I was like, man, finally someone for us. And then after that, got a little older. A young teen, I got into Mick Foley a lot. I bought Have a Nice Day, read that cover to cover. I was like, man, finally a wrestler who can write a paragraph. That's pretty cool. And his promos are great. He's pretty awesome. And then when I really got into Japanese stuff, I was like, Toshiaki Kawada. That's the greatest wrestler that's ever lived. So great. And then Bryan Danielson came out. I was like, well, that guy's pretty good too. And I would say after Danielson, it's become a lot more just maybe I can't pick favorites because on any given day I might feel different. Like Terry Funk is a good pick, for greatest wrestler of all time. I can't argue with that. But I would say in my life, those are the only people that I've ever been in the pole position in my brain of at different times in my life. If you would ask me, I would say those were my favorite wrestlers ever at different points.
Fair.
Do you have a specific pick, or is it more?
No, I also don't feel like I have the breadth of knowledge to really say. I would say Danielson has been my favorite probably since I got really into ROH way, but 20-something years ago. He's pretty consistently been my favorite, the person that I've, really had that strong attachment to. As a kid, when I was a little kid, in the 80s, obviously Hulk Hogan, and then Bret Hart, and, just the people that were pushed. Unfortunately, there was definitely a time when Chris Benoit was my favorite wrestler, and it makes me feel very uncomfortable to this day. I was also always a big Mick Foley fan. But yeah, Bryan is as much of a favorite as anyone's ever been for me. So doesn't necessarily mean I think he's the best ever, but as far as my favorite, yeah, it has to be. I mean, I've been to so many of his big moments live, and just followed him for so long. Definitely like my favorite wrestler of my adult life for sure.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit on the 6 Hour Bryan Danielson podcast special we did, which is on obviously our feed, that I think the thing like that really, in a way, makes it different with Danielson for us is we kind of grew up with him. Like we're of very similar age, and he's a wrestler. We watched his entire career basically from start to finish as it happened. And I feel like when wrestlers, I almost feel the same way with music too, where there's so many great albums that like what's going to be the best albums are the ones that aren't just great music, but kind of connect to moments of your life. And I feel like there's so many great wrestlers, but the ones that are really going to hit maybe above everyone is the ones that you go, well, this wasn't just me watching them on tape years or months or whatever after the fact. This was like you just said, you watched a lot of his like most formative, important moments. You were there in the building as they happened, and you watched it like you were like, this guy's the greatest. More people need to know this guy. And we were like freaking out as everything we hoped for in some ways came true for him. Like, as much as I love like Terry Funk or Kawad or something like that, we don't have that relationship with those. We can't,
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%.
Yeah. So, yeah, for this show, I will say this was an interesting show to me, Honor Nation, because one, the crowd's really good for a thing 400. And I think you mentioned how early on, how much energy that was kind of giving you. And it did for me too. But there are parts of the show, a lot of the first half where I'm as about as ornery. Like, I really hate the Age of the Fall stuff other than the Necro Butcher in ring. I hate the interference. I hate the promos. I hate that stuff. The Hangman 3 stuff is fine, but it's also, again, all the interference on the show, the hero Claudio thing, which again is also entertaining, but just like, again, like we both said, it's kind of a lot at this point. But then, I liked, that 3-way a bit more than you, and I thought that was really fun. We both really liked the 6-man tag semi-main event. We both really loved the Danielson Aries match, and Steen Morishima is good. Where by the end of it, it was like, I don't know how many shows where I was so angry at one point, and by the end I was like, this is a pretty good, like very good B show. So it was really a tale of two halves. It won me over, Matt. It dared to push me away, and then it pulled me back in.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't hate the Age of the Fall stuff as much as you. Like, I think it's bad, but it didn't bother me the way it bothered you. Like, and it was a small part of the show, and I thought the Necro Butcher stuff I found enjoyable, so it didn't bother me to that degree. So I think overall I actually liked the show more than you. Even though I know you liked it. I mean, there were a number of like really, really good matches on this show, and one that I thought was particularly great, and the crowd was hot, and it was entertaining really for me the whole way through. I like some of the early matches more than you did too. Good variety. I would call this a classic, and when I say classic, I don't mean like all-time classic, great show, but just classic in the sense of like something that perfectly embodies the defining characteristics of what you want for an ROH show. It was a B show, yeah, but it was just very good. Like, it was a very good one of the better B shows we've watched, honestly, in a long time. And yeah, I thought this was a hoot. So a surprisingly good show that I did not remember, is what I would say.
And to list something in your favor for your case, I will say, even if you're just looking for high-end matches, there are a bunch of Saturday night, technically A-level ROH shows that don't have a match on them as good as I think Aries and Danielson was on this show. So,
yeah,
like,
for sure,
if you're just looking for like a top-end, like really great match, this has it. So, yeah, that brings us to the end of the show. So for plugs, ThROH The Years at gmail.com. That's ThROH as we spell it here. If you go and spell it the normal way, the abhorrent way, you will get another probably delightful podcast with Todd Martin. So check that out. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter for a Matt. It's both of us are on Blue Sky under similar names. And next time on the show, we will be covering undeniable, which is, yes, we just covered one on the last show. ROH was already taping another pay-per-view. So that's kind of a weird scheduling thing, but we're already going to be coming another ROH pay-per-view. It's Nigel getting one last title shot against Morishima in the main event. Aries and Strong renew their rivalry with another singles match. Steve and Generico they get to go up against the Hangman 3. I think there's another wild Jay Briscoe Necro Brawl. That's a tongue twister.
Necro Butcher Brawl.
On the DVD version, which is what we'll be covering. That has the extra matches. So it should be fun. Another, significant of some level show for ROH. So until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.